hour, you wouldn't have seen it.
Professor,
Mm-hmm.
out of
Yes, sir.
curiosity,
Uh-huh.
I wrote this in the chat, but I don't know if you saw it. I was wondering how come we don't use the megapixel megascans for Unreal Engine since it's free with Unreal Engine?
Okay, you're asking me why we're not using a particular product?
No, it's not a product. It's kind of like part of Unreal Engine. It's just like a giant texture network that has a bunch of materials and stuff. I was just curious why we weren't using it.
If you have additional places that you have found that you think would be beneficial for the class, like a free texture farm or website that allows you to go through and download a bunch of free textures, then yeah, you can make that information available.
Yeah, this is a company that's owned now by Epic.
Okay,
It's called Megascans,
correct.
and
I am familiar.
every user of Unreal Engine, anyone who has access to Unreal Engine, can use every single texture of there. They have easily millions of textures. They have millions of
So I am
pre-built.
familiar with the company, and if you actually go to Unreal Engine or Epic Games, the Epic Games launcher, and
Yeah.
go into the marketplace,
Hmm.
we'll just wait for my computer to. There we go. And we can go into free, and there's mega scans right there. So if you're
Yeah.
talking about textures, you can definitely look for textures here. Sorry, the seller no longer is selling content on the marketplace and their profiles have been discontinued. Please contact marketplace support for any questions or concerns.
They
So
don't
is
sell
that
their content anymore. It's like a small plugin you have to install for
okay?
them, and it gives you free access to everything. They have a million assets, pre-built assets, and all that stuff. Um, so if we're not going to use that here, can I use it for my personal projects as well?
You can do whatever you want. I'm going to show you. I mean, basically, the way my class works is you have labs, right? You do the labs. We follow the instructions so that you learn what's going on inside of Unreal, the things that I need you to know to be able to complete your project. And then the other half of the class is going to be you working on your project. Now, one of the labs is a research lab. The last one, you're going to go and do a bonus lab. Now, I give you a list of stuff that you can go through, right? So I give you like 5 or 6 different bonus labs that you can do. You only have to do one. And then if you want to go and find something on your own because you want to be able to incorporate that idea into your game, that's going to be, let's say, one of your key features for your game, then absolutely that can be your bonus lab. If I see that there's enough stuff that you've done with it, if all you're doing is like 3 things and it took you like 2 minutes to finish whatever it is that you're doing, no. But if you come to me and go, here, I found a lab that's like 3 hours long from some other person online on YouTube, and I really like what they're doing. Like, for example, one of the things that I do for the bonus lab is I didn't know how to set up, let's say, an inventory system on my own, right? So I went and found somebody else that was doing an inventory system that had a really nice sort of like 4 or 5 videos, probably about 20 or 30 minutes deep on a video. And I built an inventory system for myself based on that person's video. And then what I did was I saw that there was a couple of things that he did different than we did, and then it wasn't going to mesh with what we had done as far as like our health bar. And there was a couple of things that he skipped over, especially with the health bar. So I did like a small, like a supplemental video to his, and then I drop all his links on my on Canvas so that you can get to it, and then I'll drop my supplemental video in there too, so you can see how that so what he did works with what we're doing. And this is where I have some students that'll come up with ideas like using the lighting system. How do we get that to create damage to us as we're walking around? If we're in the light, no damage. If we have double light, how do we stop it from giving us more points, like adding life to us? Like if you have a flashlight and you walk into a light bulb in the room, right? You would have 2 light sources, and if you're doing like a +1, -1 thing to be able to work your health bar, right? So if you're in the dark with no light, -1 for every second that you're out there, right? If you have 100 health bar, that leaves you with like maybe about a minute of time between one light source and another light source. Um, and that's the way the game was working, right? So the enemy was the darkness, and they had to figure out a way logically to get all those things to coincide to make it only work in a certain environment, like because they started their character outside and then walked their character inside. Um, um, and then they only wanted it inside, and then there was the double light source thing, and then the negative light source thing. So and then you had the flashlight outside. So how do you stop it from giving you bonus points while you're outside the environment that was setting up the conditions for the +1 -1? So there was like a lot of stuff that we had to do to get that project to work, and I counted that as a bonus lab because it was, I mean, it took the student like at least 2 weeks to figure it all out, and it took me probably a couple of days working on what he had gotten to help him get to the finishing point with that. Um, but anyways, yeah. So yeah, if there are things, because I mean, Megascans used to be just a download. That's actually why I'm looking here to see if I can
Yeah, it's
still
still
pull up.
there's still some packs that they have available. But what they did was they were their own separate entity that you had to pay a subscription service,
Sure.
and they're very expensive because they scan at 8K or nanite for Unreal Engine 5. So their
So it
quality
might be
is
something new with the Unreal Engine 5, and they set themselves
yeah
up a little bit different.
yeah it's all
But
about
yeah,
different
I mean, you
features.
can
So
see how many I have downloaded from them previously in the past.
right,
So, so yeah, that's
yeah,
interesting.
it's awesome, and it just requires downloading a program called Bridge, and then which adds a plugin to Unreal Engine 4,
Okay.
and
All
then you just drag and drop
right. Well, we
for
will.
another time.
Yeah, we will definitely have to. I'll have to do a little bit of research on that.
Yeah.
But cool. Thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Problem.
All right, let's see. Let's go back to this. All right, so as far as what we're looking at here, nothing has really changed. I just, like I said, put this guy up here just now, so he should be there. Yep. So there's class 8. And then let's see. The only other thing that I've done is I've gone ahead and added the
Also, excuse
links.
me, Professor.
Sure.
Yeah, I also got the textbook called Unreal Engine 4 Game Development Quick Start Guide.
Okay.
So I already got the book. Came
So you
out
got
like last week Saturday. I was expecting it to come in like around um earlier, like around like Friday. I think it came on Friday. It did it earlier, Friday.
okay.
I was surprised.
What is the book doing for you?
It was doing quite good for me a bit.
Okay, so it's giving you additional information. What is the book? I mean, like, have you been able to kind of thumb through it and see what it's doing?
Yeah, showing me how to add blueprints, creating EQBs.
Okay, well, we're actually going to get into blueprints today when we finish with the lighting, because what I've been doing as far as the way that this class is working is I'm setting you up to understand how to create an environment. So then that way we can use that environment for our game and start developing our levels. So like the first, for example, if I go back to,
Yeah, the first person view.
well, I'm setting everything up for a first person shooter. So what they may be doing is they might be going through and explaining, because here's the thing: is we could do it 2 ways. I could sit there and I could go through every single little button that's in the software and say this does this, this does this, this does this. But if you don't make a project with it, you don't see how all the pieces come together, and you don't understand. You understand maybe exactly what this is, but you don't understand how it fits into the bigger piece. So what I try to do, and what this class is sort of like a reverse capstone, where a capstone class is usually at the end of at the end of your academics, and it sits at the end, so then that way you can use everything that you learned over the last 2 or 3 years and apply it to that class. So you basically end up working on your own project. Here, what I'm doing is I'm taking that capstone class and bringing it to the very beginning of class. It's sort of like putting somebody at the edge of a pool on the deep end and pushing them in and saying, learn how to swim. Because whether you swim or you don't, Lifeguard will still be there. They'll come and grab you, but you learned something. You know what I mean? You learned water, you learned this, you learned that, and at some point you are able to take that away, and you can see now. Because if not, what ends up happening is you start off with these smaller classes that you don't understand how they fit together. But if you have one class where all the pieces come and they fit together, then you can see how the other pieces, as you're learning, fit into the bigger picture, right? So what I do with my class here, there it is labs 1 through 4 are space, interior, exterior, and how to control it. Labs 5 through 8 will be enemy characters, dealing with what will be the blueprints and setting up pawns and setting up AI and things like that. All of that's going to be here. So you'll have to understand collision settings, gravity settings, physics settings. All that's going to be here. How to make your enemy characters move, which are navigation, and then how to create more complex enemies, like maybe an enemy that shoots stuff at you, or rotates like a turret, or only comes and attacks you when you get close enough to it, right? And then from there we do health and damage system, and then finally the last things that you need to be able to do. So first, set up the environment. Second, set up your enemies and the conditions for your game, and set up a win and lose condition, health, damage, right? So either you win or you lose based on where your health is. And then from that, how do we get from one map to another map to another map to create the menu screens, to create when I hit play, it takes me to level 1 where I set up my character, and that's where my character starts, and then the game starts, right? And then the last one, so that would be those two, and then finally how to export the game, right? It's a lot of skills, I understand. And if we feel like we're stuck here, wait until we start 5, because you'll be taking all the stuff we've learned collectively to build into everything else that we're doing, right? So, like I said, I've taught this class several times, and I'm building the class up in a way that makes sense for what we're doing. So, what I would do is, if you are having issues with your computer, try to fix the computer. If it keeps crashing, take a picture with your cell phone of the crash so that you have something to show me when it's happening, or maybe you make a small video of it on your phone and you send that in a link to me on Canvas or something to where I can see what's happening with the computer so I can better help you. But if you're running the computer and you're running what was it, the stuff that checks the internet and make sure everything's okay.
Oh, you mean the antivirus?
Yeah, if you're running your antivirus and you're running the computer and you're trying to run Unreal and you've only got 8 gigs and you're trying to run, let's say, YouTube to watch a video at the same time that you have Unreal open plus all those other things happening, I can imagine that, yeah, your computer's going to be, whoa, I don't have enough stuff to be able to get it to work. Remember, I think that Unreal needs at least 8 gigs to work. That's not in addition to what your computer's doing. The bare minimum requirements to get that program to work is 8 gigs. Your computer works off of at least 1 gig. If you open up a web page, if you have your antivirus running, those are also sucking up energy, sucking up processing power. So you'll have to turn a couple of things off. If you need to, use your phone to watch the videos, and then
They use a phone or use a TV. Since I can use my console to watch the videos.
okay, well, there you go. So you're divvying it up, so then that way the computer's only doing one thing and that's it. Okay, so on to the class. All right, so today what we're going to do is we're going to continue with the lighting. Let's switch back over to this, and let's move this guy down. All right, so what I've got here is I've got a level that I've been working on that has my mountains, it has my cave. Let me speed this up a bit. So I worked on a little cave area. I guess it's kind of dark now. Let's do that. I need to.
Well,
Okay. All right. Yeah, you can see my antivirus is trying to get me to purchase it. I'm saying no. Anyway, so I've got that. I've got my little world and whatever, right? So now what I'm going to do is I want to make this nighttime, right? So we'll go over that real quick again, how to create the nighttime effect with what we're looking at here. So if I go over into my world outliner and I type in the word light, if I can spell the word light, okay, we'll see that we have a light source, we have a light mass volume, which is what that orange box is right there. It's sort of changing light in that area. Then we have the skylight, which takes care of how light is being reflected. And then we have the direct light, which is actually creating the shadows. So let's put this back to where we have lit. So when we look at an object, and let me slow down, like this gentleman right here. He's got a shadow. That shadow's coming in. That's based off of this light right here and what direction that light, this arrow is pointing. So if I were to click on that light and change that, we would see that the gentleman's shadow got longer or shorter or is moving in the other direction. Now, as explained last time, the sun either does or does not follow this light based on what you are doing with the sky dome, because the sky dome is actually where the light is. So if we click on the dome and we scroll down into its details panel, we will see that we have sun height, and more importantly, before that, it would be the default, which is saying what is directing this light. Now, right now, it says light source, which is our first, that directional light that when we changed it, it created the shadows, right? So if I were to change this and remove light source from, like if I were to hit clear, then I would be able to control the height of the sun based off of the override settings that are here inside the sky dome. Let me make this move faster since we're dealing with bigger space. Even maybe a little bit faster. Okay. So now underneath sun height, and you can see that the sky dome changes based on Earth, based on what we would see with blue lighting, red lighting, and the wavelengths that would be happening as the sun goes down and over the horizon. Now, from there, if you wanted the sun to follow and be doing what the directional light is doing, we would put this back on. So we would click here underneath Directional Light Actor. We'd say go back to the light source. And if we do that, it should actually click in. Let's see what direction our light source is going. And again, now I need to slow down. Okay, so it's going in this direction. Now, if I make the change, the sun doesn't follow. I would have to go build, maybe not build the whole dang thing, but just right click on the options for build. Well, there it goes. It went ahead and popped it in, but we would go build options and build just lighting. Where is it? There it is. Actually, at the very top. So build lighting, and it would go ahead and repurpose all the shadows and make sure that everything is following and doing what we need to. Now, with that said, let's go ahead and play with the sky dome a little bit so we can create sort of the conditions that we need for nighttime. So we're going to go to and click on the sky dome itself. Once you do that, we'll go back to default Directional Light Actor. We'll clear it so it's working on its own, and then we have control over where the sunrise and the sunset is. Okay, and I still have my moon up there, so let me go really fast.
Could you do that part again? Sorry.
Sure, no problem. So what I did was I clicked on the sky dome, and then I scrolled down into its details panel, and I found Directional Light Actor, and I made sure that I cleared it. Because if it's light source, it's based off of the other light, the one that we can rotate up and down. If we want to control the sunset, we need to clear it, so then that way there's nothing here. Then we can go to the override settings, and you can change the sun height by moving the sun height here.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, from there, we still not getting a very dark image on our thing, on our landscape. We would expect it to be very, very dark, and we're not. Okay, somebody called and hung up almost immediately. Yay. Good. They did it for me. Anyways, so this light that we're seeing now is the bouncing light that we're seeing from what's called the sky. Let's see, where is it? The skylight. So that skylight, if we go to it, is this little symbol right here. So there are actually two separate lights. Let's get back here and slow down a bit. There we go. So this is the directional light. This is what we were using to change the angle of the shadows. And this is what's creating the ambient light that's there. So you have direct light and ambient light. And the ambient light is what we're seeing right now. So if we were to click on the sky dome and actually delete it, you would see that we would lose a lot of the ambient light. Now, the other thing is that we are actually still seeing a little bit of ambience, and some of that actually is coming from a thing called atmosphere. So we're going to type in Atmos. There it is right there. So there's atmospheric fog. So if I were to go and delete the atmospheric fog, we will now see that a lot of that, that's the air now is a darker color. Now we're getting very, very close to having this completely pitch dark, and part of this is still that we might need to re-render the lights. So every time you make big changes with the lights, not everything goes ahead and follows, because what the lighting is trying to do is trying to save processing power. So everything that's stationary gets a shadow that's stationary, and it has to rebuild that each time. So that way it actually takes up less processing power. So we're going to go to build, lights only, and let's see if we can get this all. And I think what's actually happening is we might still have our direct light on, which is why we're getting a light going across, even though we've brought our sun all the way down. Yep, I think that's actually what's happening. Now what's cool with that is that, you know, if you have moonlight, you would expect the moonlight to be like more of like a bluish hue, right? So what you could do is you can go to your directional light, and obviously the light build is going to hate me because I'm building the lights, and now I'm going to go and make a change to it. But I can go back to this directional light, and let's make this, see right now it says, let's see, where is its color? So that's the cloud color, atmosphere and cloud. Light, maybe the tint on the light. Let's see. There it is, light color. So it's right up at the top. I was looking too far down. So I can go here, and let's make that a little bit more blue. Okay. Now, of course, the lighting is going to hate me because I just rebuilt the lighting, and now it's probably going to have to do it again. So we'll give it a second. I'll drink some coffee while this is happening. Okay, come on, computer. You can do it. You got 64 gigs of RAM in you. Why can't you can figure it out? Okay, so there it goes. So now we have this kind of really cool, it's still light enough for us to be able to see in certain areas. There's certain places where it might be a little bit darker, so we might have some type of a light source that might be around us that's illuminating us when we get into these areas. But now we have something that looks very much like moonlight. If we wanted to, the moon's in this direction, right? So I might go back to that directional light source. Let's see, I think I still have it clicked in, and I can see, let's slow down the camera. Too slow. See, it's pointing in that direction, so let's flip it in the way that the moon is. So the moon's coming from over there. So now that I think better reflects where the moonlight would be coming in from, right? So we can see shadows coming in from that direction. And that looks Pretty good. All right. So, just to recap, there is 3, if you count the atmospheric fog, 4 different light sources that are already in the level because we did a preset, right? We said first person shooter. And so it went ahead and it put the directional light source in there. It put the skylight in there. It put the atmospheric fog in there. And you have the ability to change stuff in the sky dome, right? So 4 places that you need to go to be able to create this effect. Now, we don't have a lot of stars out. If I click on the sky dome and I scroll down far enough, well, actually, I don't think it's very far. I think it's right there. So star brightness, we can bring the stars out. And you also have other things that are associated with this, which would be like the clouds. So you can make it cloudier. And if you scroll down far enough, I think you'll get to different things like the zenith color, the horizon color. See how this is like very white? Let's see if we can maybe change that. Maybe make it a little bit more blue. The horizon color. Overall color. And then cloud color, I think, is here also. And a whole lot of nothing's happening right there. Let's see. Oh, there's cloud color. Interesting. Let's see. Cloud opacity, cloud speed, colors determined by. Let's see if we take that off. Ah, there we go. So underneath there, colors would be determined by where the position of the sky or the sun was in the sky. Now, once we've unchecked that, we can go down here and we should be able to start seeing the changes that we were making. So let me go back here. There we go.
Your cat is kind of covering.
Sorry. Well, thank you, sir. Let me move that out of the way. And there we go. So now we're able to do that. So what that was right here. So right underneath where the light actor was, we have that to none. Then we're going to go to colors determined by. We're going to uncheck that. And then that's going to allow us to be able to make the changes down here to this. So you can see right now the zenith is, that's pretty cool. Let's, zenith would be the tippy top. See how the middle is more red and then it changes as it goes down. So the zenith is the top. That's what that, for those that remember that TV brand, Zenith. Okay, so we can change the colors up there. Let's, and we can also make it darker by pulling light down this way. Okay, so now we have dark cloud, or dark sky. Horizon color is this blue that we're seeing here. We can make that more red. So if we want to do like a Mars type, like maybe we're on a foreign planet or something, we'll do something like that. We can bring the amount of black in, so then that way it's either brighter or less bright, or the tint, we should say. And then cloud color, same thing. Let's move that down. Let's make them really dark. There we go. Very, very cool. Look, even on the surface of the water. That's really neat, the reflection. Click OK. And then we have overall color. And let's make that darker since it's nighttime. Beautiful. Okay. And let's bring the stars out a little bit since the red might be breaking them up. Okay, very cool. So now we are definitely at night and we are in need of some lights. All right, so let's see. Let's go over here. So when you have your place actors that are over here on the side, one of the options, you have basics, then you have lights. So we can see the directional light and skylight, which were one of the two of the ones that we said were already in there by default, right? That because we set up the first person shooter. Those are there. So the other three that we have is the point light, the spotlight, and the rect light. And I do finally have my cars in here. So I can't see anything right now because it's too dark. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here to the top of the viewer and switch this over to unlit. And I have placed a couple of vehicles from a free vehicle pack. And those are in here now. So I think the pack that I'm using is, it's called Vehicle Variety Pack. And so we have, I think that Jeep, the Lambo, this truck, and then I think I put this guy over here. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at using combinations of the point light, the spotlight, and the rec light to be able to properly light this vehicle. And the reason we're doing this is because this is going to help you understand all the different little things that you can change inside the light, and how to put, and sometimes you have to put certain lights together because it doesn't look right. And I think we did this with a spotlight the other day, right? We set up a lamp, and we did that outside, but I didn't have any vehicles. So, all right, so let's go with the spotlight first, because you would expect, just like a flashlight, right? It's a concentrated beam that goes in one direction, and that's what a spotlight would be, right? It's not allowed to flood out around it. It's the light is being directed in a cone shape. So if we bring that out, we put one there, and we can see that right now this is actually aimed towards the floor. So let me put this back on lit, and this is what the light is doing in our environment. So from here, obviously I need to rotate this, so I'm going to hit the space bar a couple of times. That's going to allow me to rotate the light 90 degrees and have it pointing in that direction. And you will actually see that the light itself actually has a directional arrow that it's being used, so it actually points you and lets you know, hey, this is the direction that the light is being pointed at, right? Now, with the light selected, what we'll do is we'll go into its details panel, and we'll see that we have underneath light, we have, first of all, we have obviously the transform, which would be location, rotation, and scale, so we can make the light feel bigger by increasing its size. We obviously just did rotation to make it go in that direction, and then location is where you left it, right? So then we have light. From there we have intensity. So if I want to make this a brighter light, I can bring the intensity up. I can, for the most part, almost whitewash that out where it's so bright that you can't see detail in the wall. We'll bring that down. Next option would be the light's color. So if we double click on the bar, that opens up the color picker. And now I can sit there and I can go through and I can make this sort of like a, because there's different color headlights, right? So there's some that have come out and they're like really blue. If you have like fog beams, they're a different color. A lot of the older cars have more of like a reddish tint because of the technology. I think now we're using a lot of LEDs, and back then they were using bulbs, right? So we can change the color to a slightly more reddish tint, and that would be good for that. And then from there we could also change the colors by going into the red, green, blue. Now from there we have the radius of the light, and the radius of the light, I believe, is, let's see, how far out the light extends, right? So if we're a car headlight, you would expect that it would go out several car lengths out in front of the car, right? At least enough to be able to see the people in front of you. So you would probably want to make this long, right? Now, if we're looking at that, that seems way too wide, right? So what we'll do now is we will reduce the size of the outer cone. So with a spotlight, what we can do is we can make the outer cone and the inner cone the same size, and what that's going to do is it's going to give you what's called a hard light. So we can see that the light is more like a stage, right? So if you're doing like the Batman symbol or something, right, where you got like that hard edge so that you can see the symbol in it. If you make the inner cone smaller, you're going to get a softer light, right? So this looks more like, for anybody that's had like a mag light, like a big one of those big black mag light flashlights, right? And you rotate the head of the flashlight, and you can make it go from like a tight beam to like a wide to like a flood to like a tight beam, right? So this is what this light allows us to be able to do. So we can make the inner radius and the outer radius the same, no soft edge, or you make the inner radius a little bit softer, and this is more atypical of what you would see with a car. A very long, narrow beam that has like a reddish tint to it if it's an older car. If it's a newer car, maybe a bluer tint. And then from there, it would probably push out in front of the vehicle for quite, at least a couple of car lengths. So if we go back to unlink, that seems about right. Now from here, once the light's there, what we'll want to do is obviously place it in the proper location. So spacebar a couple of times, move it down. Now, because on the inside there are no planes, when the lights sit, you can actually place the light inside the car area, and you can see that it's actually inside the mesh, but because there's nothing pointing out, we're going to get a nice clean beam coming out of the car. So if I was to go back to, let's say, lit, we can see that that is coming out. Now the problem with this obviously is just like with the lamp that we did from the other day. Normally when you look at a light, if you're looking at the source of the light, it's going to feel like it's brighter there. So what we're going to have to do is add a spotlight, a point light to this. So we'll place a point light here. And let me go back to unlit so we can see it. Okay. And with this one, we're going to want to place it approximately where we would see the light source itself. So just move that into location. And let's go to lit and see what that looks like. Now, with this light, if I go in, I'm being blocked, right? So this one I want to sit just outside the mesh, and there's like a certain sweet spot with this. Well, with this car anyways, that you have sort of like that deal right there. So not too far inside, not like the spotlight, right? We want to have it just outside so it's actually reflecting on the material. Because if it's in here, that light's not reflecting on the material. It is here because that material is on the other side of the light. So I need the light to be out here so it looks correct. Now from here, same thing. We look at the details panel with the light selected. We'll see that we have intensity, color. So maybe we'll give it a slightly more orangey red tint because it's an older car. Attenuation, maybe it doesn't need to go out that far. It could be a little bit closer. Now because this is a point light goes from, it's like an omnidirectional light, meaning that wherever the light source is, any direction from that light source, the light will spread. So if you think of like a lamp, like a old school bulb that you would put into a lamp, like a lamp, a coffee table lamp or something like that, or a lamp next to your bed, right, that doesn't have a cover on it, you just have the bulb exposed, that bulb would shine light in all directions. And that's very much what we're seeing here. It looks like a bulb, right? So it's an omnidirectional light. So if I go to attenuation, unlike the other light, right, if we click on the other light, the attenuation was a beam leaving the light. If I click on the point light, you'll see that attenuation is a circle around the light. If I move out far enough, we can see how much area this thing would be able to brighten up. Okay, so that's probably good enough for that. And let's see. So, yep, that looks pretty good. So once we've got those two there, we obviously need another lamp. We need to do it over here on the other side. I do have obviously settings that I've used for this. So what I want to do is I'm going to probably copy and paste those together. So let's go back to unlit so we can select both of the lights. So there's the one light. Let's see, where's the directional light? I'm going to hold my control key to select both lights, and I think I actually moved them. There we go. So remember, when you have two things selected in the world outliner, you can come up here to the folder, and it will place both of those in a folder, and we can call this one truck lights. All right. Then I'm going to go back and find truck lights, and I'm going to select both of the lights here again, and I'm going to do a Control W. That gives me another pair. That pair is still selected with the same relationship between the two lights as far as the distance and more or less where they are. And all I got to do now is pop them in the right place. And maybe we'll just select one. We'll move that one over a bit. Then I'll go to the spotlight and make it feel like both of them are right in the center. And maybe I'll do the same thing for this side over here. We'll go there, pop that more in the center, go to the other spotlight, pop that more or less in the center. Okay, go back to lit, let's click somewhere else, and now we have the front lights for that vehicle. Okay, cool. So the only other light then that we haven't really seen is the rect light, and what the rect light does is it's a rectangular light. So that seems weird until you walk into an office and you look up and you see those tubes, right? Those 4 tubes, sometimes 3 tubes, like the fluorescent lighting, right? That's like a tube light, and those are in a rectangular shape. They're a square shape. So that's what the rec light allows you to do, is it allows you to be able to set up a rectangular shaped light. Now for us, in the car, that's going to be usually the dome light, right? So you would have a light that would be up at the top. You'd have it in more or less like in a square shape, and then that light would illuminate the inside of the cabin to try to fill in the rectangular shape of the cabin, right? So let's add a rec light. I'll grab a rec light and I'll place it here. Let's bring it closer to where we need. And actually, let's leave it outside the car so we can look at it for a second. So when I look at this light, it has a square shape to it, right? There's an inside square shape, and then let's click on it again, and then I have what looks like these little flaps that are on the outside. For anybody that's ever folded paper or had to do folding for boxes for a job or something like that, pizza box, you can think of a pizza box almost, right? Where you have you can imagine those folding in and creating a square shape. So with that light selected, again, we're going to go into its details panel, and we're going to see that we have intensity, light color, we have radius. If we do radius, it's an omnidirectional light, but there's sort of a kick to this. Let's go ahead and look at it. Let's put it on lit. And right now we're not seeing too much. Let's get it closer to a wall. Aha. Okay, so this light, I believe, also does have a direction that it's facing. So let's flip it. And you'll see that it lights on one side, but the back side doesn't light. Right? So let me flip it back this way. See how that side is shooting light at the wall, but if I flip it, the back side is not shooting light at the wall. So this is it's like a directional light. It's like you have a point light and you cut it in half, right? And it's only shining 180 degrees out of one side, and then the other side's dark, right? So that's what you're looking at there. Now, with that, if we do the attenuation, it's obviously how much light it can spread out. So we'll bring that back, 'cause it's going to be inside of a car, so we don't really need it to be too big. Go back to, I don't know, let's say maybe 100. And now the other thing you can also do is you can shape this box. So let's move this a little bit further away from the wall. And when we look at it, right now it's a square. It's 64 by 64, but I could take this and I can make it longer. So let's say you were doing an office scene, right, for your game, and you needed to do the lighting up top, right, in those square boxes. This is how you would create that square box, right? You'd create the longer rectangular thing that the tube lights are going to go into, and this would give you the light in a longer tube. So if I bring this closer to the wall, we can see that we're getting more, and actually that doesn't look very round. Let's see if we can make it even longer. So that has a little bit more of an oval shape, and maybe if we pull back a little bit. There we go. Nice. Now you can see the very rectangular nature of that. I guess we're very, very close. But yeah, before it starts to spread out. So we can change it, let's say, make it thinner, make it wider. And basically, you're reshaping the size of the box. So now you have basically a line light. All right, now the other option that we have is what are called the barn doors. The barn doors are actually, let me make this a little bit, go back 64 to 64. Okay, so we're back where we started. And the barn doors are those flaps. So if I open the flaps up, I can make the flaps longer. And then I can also angle the flaps in. So you can see that now that has a shape more or less like a tray, right? Like if you looked at it, it's like a box shape where the light's here in the source, and it's not allowing light to bounce through it this way. So now if I bring it closer to the wall, let's see. Wow, we have a very cool, like if you're trying to do like a projector screen or something, right? There you go. Now you have a rectangular light like a projector would, and you can set that up that way. And then the barn doors, the angular nature of the barn doors, you can see how that's changing the quality of the light. Then I can change the length of the doors, which makes them bigger, and I can put the light further away. And let's see if we can recreate that effect. Almost seems like I have to be very, very close, or the barn doors have to be smaller. That's very cool. I like that. So let's say you're doing a projector, right? You might use like a small barn door like this for where the light's actually hitting the wall. And then you might use let's say, a spotlight from the projector to the wall. And then we might make the attenuation just a little bit smaller, so it's just hitting the wall fairly. And then we might make the inner cone smaller. You can go like right there. Let's make the intensity a little bit brighter. So it looks like the wall glows a bit. And cool. So now you would have, and then you would put, some kind of a static mesh here for like where the light source is coming from to make it look like a projector. But yeah, that's pretty cool. Anyways, so let's do the inside of the car. So I'll delete that guy. We'll bring this one back out. And if we're going to do it for the car dome obviously is pointing down. So we're going to rotate this 90 degrees down. We're going to then bring it into the vehicle, so we'll spacebar until we bring it in. This static mesh is actually pretty cool because it's got a whole interior thing with it, so I actually like this variety pack. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the light up far enough. Now the trick with this obviously is that we don't want to light up the outside of the vehicle. That wouldn't make sense. So if I did something like that, you see how now it's outside and it looks like it's lighting the top of the vehicle. I definitely want this to be on the inside and that it's only lighting up stuff on the inside. Now if I want to, I could probably reshape that a bit. So let me go to unlit so I can see the car and where this is more or less hitting. So we'll line that up there. We'll make it longer because the cab's a little longer. We'll thin it up a bit like this. And then we'll see how that's hitting. So we'll go back to lit. And that's actually doing a fairly decent job. I don't like how bright it's making it over there. Well, let's go in and make this a little bit, give it a bit more of a reddish tint like we would expect with an older car. And then maybe I can push this down a bit. And then it's just personal taste, like where you feel like it would be doing the best job. And now that it's closer, it's probably a little bit too bright. So I'll bring down the brightness a bit. Let's go 3.5. And now we have an orangey tinted light for the inside of our cabin. Very cool. So now we have front lights, inside light. So the last thing that we have left now are the brake lights. Now the brake light is not like the front lights, right? It's not creating a beam. It's to alert other people that you're there. So we're probably going to use a point light and not a directional light for this. Okay. Same thing, we want this to reflect on this, so we're probably going to leave it just outside. Let's go ahead and put this to lit, and we can see that it's kind of doing what it needs to be doing. Okay, and we'll push it this way because it's really more on the corner than it is on the back. There we go. Okay, from there we can make the intensity a little bit brighter because backlights are quite intense. And then we'll switch the color over to, let's say, a reddish tone, and we'll bring a little bit of darkness to it because it's reflecting through that. Okay, and let's see. Let's maybe make the attenuation a little bit. That's probably good enough. Okay, so let's click somewhere else. And let's push play and see what this looks like. So I can definitely see that there's a car over there because I can see its lights. That looks pretty good. Looks a little bit bright. Maybe we can bring that out a little bit. Inside light looks really good. Excuse me. And with the front lights, they seem like I can see too much of the circle on the middle on the inside, so I'm going to soften that up a bit. So let's go and fix those things. So I'm going to go back, click on this light, maybe make it come out a bit. So I get a little bit more interaction and playing with the vehicle. Like we get to see more of the back of it. Let's make this more red. Okay. And at this point, now we're just going back, and this is all just personal taste. Like, how bright do you want the light? There's no right or wrong as long as it looks and feels right to you. Okay, so we'll select not the point light, but the spotlight that's inside. And let's bring the inner cone down and maybe make the outer cone a little bit bigger. And I'm going to use full numbers so I can remember this. So let's go 30 and 10 and 30. So we'll go 10 and 30. There we go. And then we'll do the same thing for the other light. Okay, so that looks nice and soft. Let's push play again. Okay, that looks a little bit better. Maybe it's bleeding too much onto the back. Oh, this might be because I haven't rendered. Might need to render. Although that looks like it changed. Those look a little bit softer. Maybe the thing's just a little bit too close, so we're getting too much of the play there. But there we go. Lighting for a car. Alright, so from here, the other part of the tutorial would have been working with interior lighting. So let's go into the interior part of the house. And what we would be looking for would be ways to light different things. So I'm going to start off with the lamps. Now, when you get into some of these meshes, they do have the proper space inside the mesh for you to be able to drop the lamp, sort of like we saw with the car, where we could put it inside or outside of the mesh and it created a slightly different effect. So here, definitely a point light. Drop that in there. Put it more or less where I see the other light. Maybe bring it up a little bit so it's not actually in the mesh. Okay, and let's go to lit. Very, very cool. So not a lot of effort, and we get the little shadow, and that's happening obviously because of the mesh itself. The lampshade is actually working the way it's supposed to. And let's do the same thing for the other side, right? So I'll just copy that same lamp, click on the lamp itself, the light that we dropped in there, do a Control W so I have a second one, and then we'll grab that one and shift it over to the other lamp, and let's see if we can drop that. More or less in the right place. Okay, very cool. So now we have lit a practical. Practical in the film industry would be a light that's actually being seen on screen. So here's a light source, like a lamp, that's actually being seen on screen. We could probably go ahead and drop that light, because that was the one that we had set up in there to sort of light the room so we could see what's going on. Now, for anybody that's ever been, when anybody has side lamps like this, if you have two of them on like that, you know that you're not going to get this much darkness between the two beds, or between the two lamps, I should say. So we're going to actually add a point light in here, but we're going to make it soft. So it's not going to be super bright. Let's make it like a 2. And then the other thing that I'm going to do is I'll obviously pull this out to where it's not actually like the attenuation is only, say, like about right here. So now, let's click on something else. There we go. So we get something that looks a little bit more realistic, right? We would get a little bit of atmospheric or ambient sort of lighting. Okay. Now the other thing that we could obviously light that's a little bit different would be the TV. Right? So if we're going to, let's say, light up the TV, it's a rectangular shape. So we'll grab a rectilight. We'll pop it on the TV. We'll bring it in really close. We'll make it the right size for the TV. So we'll go Details Panel, Light. Change the height. Oh, that's the barn doors. Okay, this one. There we go. Obviously, we want to color inside the lines. There we go, more or less. Okay, let me scroll behind the TV so it's not bright on the back side, right? So, and we've got it there. And then from here, it'd just be coloring it to, let's say, make it look like, when you leave your TV on too long, right? And it goes into like that, like a solid color or something, right? It usually goes into like a dark blue almost, right? So let's actually drop this light, which we had just floated in the room. And now we have a TV screen that's lit, right? But now we need to have it going the other direction, because you would associate a lit TV with some light being spilled out into the room, right? So let's actually take that same rec light. We'll do a Control W. We'll flip it. And now we have a little bit of light spillage into the room. And if we wanted to, let's say, we'll bring that. And you can see where the light is changing the floor down there. So depending on how far back your TV was, something like that. Let's attenuate this out a little bit more. Let's see. That's good enough. Let's see. Maybe we make the intensity a little bit brighter. Oh, there we go. So we'll just bring the intensity up. Same color as the TV. And now you have this very cool screen that's lit. And what we did was we used 2 rec lights. One to create the glow on the TV. And then we set the color for it. And then we flipped it. And then all we did was we brought the intensity up to create the glow in the room. Right? Okay. Let's see what other kind of lighting thing we can do. What else we have in here? Alright, so for most of what we've done, what we've looked at in the lighting would be, to light most of the stuff would be the individual things would be the point light, the spotlight, and the rec light, right? So we saw that with the car, we saw that with the TV, we saw the use of multiple lights to create a certain effect, right? Or the different types of lighting that you would expect in a vehicle, right? We saw how we can change the color to it. And then we went inside and we saw how we can combine lights with pre-existing meshes that we find from packs and see if we can light them a certain way to create the right environment. And then from there, you know, there's always one light, and then, you know, there's always a directional light and then some type of an ambient light, right? So we saw that with the cars. We saw that definitely here with the light that we dropped here to kind of make it feel a little bit like it was filling in some of the space in between the lights, so it wouldn't, the shadows wouldn't be so hard. And then the other thing would be the TV that we did. Let's get back to the TV. There he is. And how cool that looks by using 2 rec lights opposites of each other with different intensities, but using the same color to generate that effect. So as far as lighting's concerned, I think we've hit it pretty good. I think we've done quite a few things. We've made it dark outside. We brought the stars out. We know now how to control the position of the sun with our directional light, right? We know that the skylight is giving us, so the directional light would be giving us the hard shadows. The skylight would be giving us the soft ambient light. If you want to make it feel like nighttime outside, you definitely need to get rid of, or, you know what, we probably don't need to get rid of our skylight. We could probably drop that back in. And then from there, it would be, you know, changing it to the right color, or, you know, because we still got hard shadows there, but we also have a moon. Those moons have some certain color, and depending on the intensity of that skylight, you can create some, you know, some of the ambient light that you might have because you have the 2 moons out, right? So as you know, if you go outside and there's a moon, there is harsh lighting because the moon is a very directional light, but there's also a bit of a soft light because it's so big, right? So it's sort of both a little bit, and so you just play around with those settings to get something that looks more or less right. So directional light, skylight outside, along with the sky dome to create the effects for the sky, to give us the dark sky with clouds. Get rid of the atmospheric fog. That seems to take up a lot of processing and also throw some of this effect off. And then your point light, your spotlight, and your rec light to do all your environmental or object static mesh lighting. Any questions on lighting?
I have several, but I'll reserve them for later.
Well, go ahead, since we are actually talking about lighting, and that's this chapter.
So I've done everything
Okay.
possible, like every step you've done. I've gotten rid of the atmospheric fog. I've lowered the brightness of I lowered the sun.
Mm-hmm.
Adjusted the color of the sky. I added the directional light. I did all the things you need to do to it. But then it's still bright as day outside. After
Okay.
I built my lighting.
After you rebuilt your lighting, so that may be so if it's bright outside, it may be because the brightness is going to come from only 2 things. It's going to either come from the directional light, which you can bring down the intensity of the directional light, so then that way it's a lot.
I have it set at 0.
You have it set at 0.
Yeah.
And what about your skylight?
I can tell you I have it at the brightness. I have it at 3.
Yeah, but at 3, so that's relatively weak. The other thing that I would do maybe is you might have more than a couple of lights on, and so what I would do is go to the world outliner, type in the word light, and then see how many actual lights are coming up, because you may have 2 directional lights or you might have 2 source lights.
I have a lot of point lights because that kind of skipped ahead of what you did
Sure,
last week when I
but
added point
what
lights.
about the directional light? How many of those do you have? The
I
one that's labeled
have
light source with the little sun. See how that one's got like a little sun on it?
yeah, I have 2, so I'll get rid of those now.
Well, that's probably why it's still bright. Because if you have 2 of those, then you made the changes on one, but the other one is overriding the other one because it's brighter.
That was it.
Okay,
Thank you, sir.
no problem. Nice. Okay. All right. So there's lighting. Let me do this. I'm gonna run to the bathroom real quick because I've been drinking a lot of water and coffee. 2 minutes. I'll be back, and then what we'll start doing is lab 5, or actually what? So there's 2 things that I want to do. I obviously want to get into lab 5, but I also want to make sure that you guys are able to understand how to turn in projects, because I think that is another thing, because I haven't seen anybody turn in a project yet. Um, and there are some of us that I believe have gotten through the labs and are able to do it on the computers that we have. And it may just be a, how do I turn it in? Can you explain that again one more time? So I want to go over that at least once before we leave today, and then we're going to go into lab 5. But first, I'm going to go to the bathroom, and I will be right back. Okay, 1, 2, check, 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 and we're back. Let's pause that. Okay, so enemy characters, right? So we just finished with basically being able to do everything to an environment, right? We started off with an empty template, and based off that empty template, we have now created a landscape with sun and oceans and land and tunnels and caves and all sorts of proper lighting, so it looks cool. And we could probably even go into that moon and make it a little bit more red at some point. But we now have a really cool environment. So now, if we're a game designer, right, the next step, the next stage is creating adversary things, right? Creating situations that would take life points away or add life points or something like that, right? So eventually, the very, very last group of videos, which will be Lab 8, will be on health and damage systems. So that'll tie in everything. But first, we need to create the enemy characters before we can create the health and damage systems. Not that it has to be that way, but as far as teaching it, it makes sense, right? First, you create your enemy, and then it bumps into you and takes life away from you. All right, so what I'm going to do is I like the environment that I've created, so I don't want to change what I've done with my sky. So what I'm going to do is, this happens to be a map that is, let's say, first person BP. No, sorry, needs to be first person BP. And if we go into this folder called maps, if you've just been building on the default map that was there, yours would be called first person example map. Now, you would click on that map, right click on it, and say duplicate. And what that's going to do is it's going to create another level. It's going to create a new map. And if you already have all this work done in it, then the map that it makes is a copy of the one that you just did. So that's what I'm going to do with my practice map. So I'm going to right click on my practice map, which is the map that I've been working on right now. That's just the name of the one that I'm working on. And I'm going to say duplicate that map. So now I have practice map 1, and I'm going to call this practice map underscore day, right? So that's going to be the new one. I'm going to switch this back over to day so we can see everything that we're doing. And this practice map, I don't believe I can change the name of it right now because I actually have that map open, but I can do it once I click on the other map. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save all. It's going to say sure. It's going to make all the stuff that I need. And so now I have practice map day and practice map. So I'm going to double click on the new map that I made, and we may or may not see a difference as far as like where the camera starts and all that other stuff. Or we are actually in this map. Let's see, double click, what map are we actually in? Oh, I could go up here. So practice map day is the one that we're actually in. So I can, because this is not the open one, right click on it and say rename and call this one night. Now, if you're doing this for a game and you have like a day and a night, and you want them to be independent levels like this, like you want them to like have to fight through the level during the nighttime or during the day so they know where everything is, and then they have to come back out like they're leaving the castle but it's at night, so you make it a night scene. And now you just doubled up your levels, right? You got 2 for the price of 1. You built the map, it's all there, it's in the daytime, you have certain things happening during the daytime. At nighttime, other things might be, maybe the monsters come out or the aliens come out or whatever, and now you have 2 maps that can be different from each other that are based off of the same design, the same area. So that's a very cool way to do this. So anyway, so I am now in the one called day. So let's make this, let's just flip this back over, and I'm going to just make this daytime real quick. So I'm going to go back to all my lights. I'm just going to go lights, and we'll go to this light, and we'll bring up its intensity. Whoa, too bright. Maybe let's go 10. And then we'll go back to the sky dome. We'll say get your information from the light source. And then we will go to light source, throw that back up in the sky, and then bring the intensity back up on this. And then we probably need to do a rebuild and a couple of other things. But this is bright enough to see what we're going to be doing. Alright, so let's do a quick build. Alright, so the very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create this thing that looks like a small platform, right? And the reason for this is because this is going to show me, because you're going to have to show me this skill, right? So we're going to create a platform, and on each one of these platform we're going to set up different static mesh boxes, and we're going to set up different conditions for them, right? So we're going to go through all the different things that will make a box react in the environment, right? So we'll just wait for this light build. It's almost done. And I don't know if you can, let me see if I can zoom around here real quick. So that's exactly what I did here, right? I just went and found I went and grabbed a geometry, put it on the floor as a square, made it big enough so I could put a couple of other boxes on there. And then I built another geometry and then put that concrete looking background on it, right? So let me grab this guy and move it out of the way for now. Come on, finish. Thank you. Okay, we'll just move that guy out of the way for now. So just to redo this, right? So I'll hit delete, 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 delete. So we will go find a geometry, put it on the floor. It has to be big enough for my character to be able to jump on it eventually. So I don't need this to be, let's say, any higher than maybe 20, or let's call this maybe 30. And actually, definitely my character would be able to get on that. Let's say if I jumped, let's make this 100. We'll put it on the floor. Okay, and then I'm just going to make it big enough, right? So X and Y, let's go 500 by 500. And let's make it look a little interesting. Go back to content. I'm going to type in concrete and filter just materials. Select the geometry, select, and then select matching so that we got all of them, and then I'll drop it on one surface and it'll apply it to all the surfaces, right? Okay, from there I just want to make a backdrop for this, so same thing, we'll grab this one, go Control W, so I have a copy of it, then I can rotate that copy up 90 degrees, and then place it sort of like that, right? So it's sort of like you got this little L that's going to be like a display, right? Remember when you were in science fair, right? And you had your little poster in your little area on the desk, right? And then this is going to be like a display for each one of the boxes that we're going to work on. All right, so now that we have this set up, we are ready to start talking about well, collision settings, mobility settings, and physics settings. Alright, so first thing that I want you to see is that if I push play and I walk out into this environment and I shoot it, it doesn't move, right? I can walk on it, it allows me to walk on it, I can walk into the wall, and it stops me, right? So these are things that are already set up because this is a geometry and I'm a static mesh. So because it's a geometry, it's going to by default block everything. There are ways that you can change that, but for right now, if you bring in a base geometry and don't do anything to it, this is the way it's going to react to you. Now, this is very different from what happens when I go to basic and I go grab a cube. If I grab a cube and place it on the platform that we just created, and I walk, and now I push play, and I shoot it, it also is blocking everything. But I think some of us will remember the other static meshes when we went in, that these actually moved. So how do we create that effect, right? How do we get the static mesh that we just dropped in, or any static mesh that we dropped in, to create the same effect? Okay. So when we look at the static mesh, when we click on it and we go into its details panel, we'll see, there it is. Let's kind of scroll and close that up a bit. There we go. And we'll see just underneath transform that we have location, rotation, scale. Those we're familiar with. We know how to move stuff around and how to rotate it. What we haven't really talked about is this last option that's down here that's called mobility. So mobility, right now, it's set to static. Now, as we go through the different options, one of the things that you'll notice is that a lot of this has to do with lighting. And the reason why it has to do with lighting is because if an object is not going to move and you set the direction of the light, that shadow is always going to be there, right? It doesn't move. And that saves the computer processing power by just making those pixels darker. Do you see what I'm saying? Like it bakes, let's call it baking in the lighting, right? The shadow's there, that object's never going to move, and because it's static, and you can actually see there the options that it says. It says a static object cannot change in the game. It cannot be changed, so it's there, it's static. Allows baked lighting, meaning the shadows are stuck to wherever the lights and the object are at that time when you place them. And then it allows for very fast rendering. So the more stuff that you don't have to move inside the game, the better it is for making the game, because now those things are static, they're not going to move, and the game doesn't have to waste a lot of power trying to figure out what may or may not happen to the shadows, right? Now, let's look at the next one over. The next one over is called stationary. Stationary usually is indicative of something that's the object itself is not going to move, but maybe there's a moving part in it. Maybe it's like a light switch, right? Or like a lever, right? You've played enough dragon dungeon games where there's like a lever that you have to pull, right? The lever itself, the object doesn't move on the screen, but the lever itself does get pulled. So the static mesh has like an animation in it, but the object itself never moves from that location. You can't pick up the lever and move it. The lever's stuck into the wall. The light switch is on the wall, right? So this is what stationary means. It stays there, but there may be a possibility that the shadows will have to be refigured out because you move the lever, because your character walked over to it, hit the whatever key is assigned to moving an object, and moved the object. So the shadows are going to have to change, because if it moved and the shadow didn't, it would look weird. So stationary. Now, this costs a little bit more energy for the computer to hold, because it needs to know where those shadows are going to be, but it can plot the shadow path, right? So instead of having anything be able to create a shadow or cast a shadow from this object is from position A to position B. The shadow is going to be here, and then the shadow is going to be there, and we can track the shadow going across whatever is in the background, right? And then that way it can be saved, right? So, and then the last option that we have is movable. And when we read movable, this says object can be moved and changed inside the game, is totally dynamic, casts what's called a dynamic shadow, meaning that the shadow is going to move when the object moves, and this gives us the slowest rendering ability, right? So the more movable stuff that you have inside your game, the more processing power it's going to take. It's going to render less. Or it's going to take more time to render. So if I want to make this thing movable, like earlier, right, I walked up to it and I shot it and it didn't move. So let's just move this one setting, right? We're just going to move this from static to movable, and I'm going to push play again. Okay, so we're still having a problem, right? We made it a movable object, right? So that's dealing with lighting and the fact that it can be changed inside the game, but we're still not getting the ability to be able to move it. So let's scroll down a little bit further, and we see, there's this thing called physics. So static meshes have an option in them that allows you to be able to adjust their physics to the game environment, right? So let's just turn that on just for default, and then we'll push play again. Okay, now I have a moving box, right? So now we have a box that reacts to when I shoot it with my projectile. It also reacts to when I bump into it. Notice that I can just, well, let's go push it into the lake. Let's have a little bit of fun with this. Yay, okay. And down she goes. All right, now our box is gone. Anyways, we'll hit escape and go back. But now we have a box that reacts to us and to the projectile. And let's actually add another box, right? So I'm going to just take this box. I'm going to hit Control W to duplicate it, add another one, hit Control W again to add a third one. And let's set those on top of each other, right? So now let's push play. I'm going to walk over to the box. I can shoot the first box. And let's see if I can get the box to react to the other box. Like if I can make this box back here move because I shoot this box. I can. So that means it's also reacting to whatever these boxes are, right? Now, it is also bouncing off of the back wall, right? So that means that it is, that geometry is blocking it. So now we have to figure out why those settings are there, right? But before we do that, let's look at, because right now if I hit this box, it goes flying, right? It goes, sure.
What happened to the Nerf balls?
What do you mean?
I don't know, you fire your gun. At the boxes, I didn't even see it hit the boxes.
If I'm too close, it may have happened too fast. But I think you can definitely, I see them. Are you saying why do they look like they disappear? Well, we'll have to figure that out. Right? Because we do have those. If I touch the box, I don't disappear, right? Well, maybe not that box. But if I touch the box, I don't disappear. But the bullet does. This is a very interesting box. We'll get to this eventually. So we'll make boxes blow up here in a second. Okay? But this may be something that has to do with the projectile. Eventually we're going to take a look at that, but that's a good observation. It's a very good observation. All right, so we're going to hit escape real quick, and we're going to go back to this. What I want to do is I want to change how this box reacts, right? Like, because we can have, obviously, things have size, but they also have mass, right? So if you have mass, you have a heaviness too. You can have something that's very small and very heavy, or you can have something that's very big, like styrofoam, and doesn't weigh anything, right? So let's add mass to these different boxes. So I'm going to click on the very first box. I'm just going to make sure that I only have one box selected. And there where physics was, right, that little thing that said stimulate physics, the next thing that we see down is mass in kilograms, right? So we're going to turn that on, and by default it looks like the mass in kilograms is 100. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the first box, and I'm going to make this one, let's say 500. I'm going to go to the second box over here. Its physics is turned on. Let's turn on its mass. Let's make this one 1000, and let's go to this box and turn on its mass. See, so we have 500, 1000, 100, right, excuse me. So 100, 500, 1000. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to change the color on each one of these boxes, so then that way we can see that it is a different box. So I'm going to go here. Let's make that one red. Let's go to this one. I'm clicking here on the material for each one of the boxes. I'm just scrolling down to find whatever material. Let's see what that one does. Okay, so we got some cool, looks like crushed something. And then let's go to the very, very heaviest of ones. And let's just pick a rando material for that. Something bright. That's like an orange. Nope, that's very similar to the other color. Let's go with this one. Okay, neat. So we can definitely tell that each one of those boxes is different, which is what I wanted to do with the materials. All right, so now that we have that and we have the different weights, let's go ahead and push play. And we know that the heaviest box is actually this one down here, right? If I hit that one, not a lot of movement. This one, the one up there with the stripes, that one was 500. If I hit it, it moves a lot more, right? And this one that's red should just go flying, right? We can see that it has a lot, it's a lot lighter. One thing makes it jump up into the air almost twice as high as it was. This one over here, when I hit it, it moves. We get it to like sort of like flip over once. And with the other one, the one that's more like the metal, let's see if I hit it, we can't even get it to flip, right? I would have to probably hit it quite a few times to get some momentum going, right? And same thing if I run into things. So let me hit escape. Let me go back and push play. And this time I'm just going to do the same thing, but I'm going to run into them instead of hitting them with projectiles. And a lot of this is based off of velocity as well. So if I run into them faster, I have more inertia, more weight. We're just going to shoot those off. And we'll, for example, with that on the floor, if I run at it, see how I was able to move it more than if I'm really close to it and I push it. Well, not so much. Let me kind of clip it. There is a velocity thing to this. Anyways. All right, so that's one thing. Now, the crazy thing is right now, all of them are reacting to gravity in the same way. So I think it was, I forget, it was Newton or Einstein or one of them who said if you take like a feather and a bowling ball and take them to the surface of the moon and drop them, they would both hit the surface at the same time because their mass is based off of the gravitational pull of the object that they're on. And with no air, there's nothing stopping the feather from falling at the same rate as the bowling ball, I think is how it's supposed to happen. All right, so it's like air resistance, and there's no air resistance on the moon because there's no air. Oops, we don't want to delete that. Let's just hit end. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stack each one of these boxes on top of each other, right, like that. And if I hit the bottom one, so let's go ahead and push play. If I run over and I hit the bottom one, which is the lightest of the boxes, they all more or less fall at about the same rate. Let's change that. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to make it very, very weird, let's make the big object react to gravity differently. So there is what's called a linear dampener, which is the very next option, this one. And right now it's set to 0.0. All the boxes are actually set to 0.0. And what that means is their free fall rate, how fast they fall. So let's increase this rate for the top box to, let's say, let's make it really slow. Let's make it 50. So we're adding resistance to the fall. That's what we're doing. So it's a dampening the linear descent, the fall rate. So we're going to go to this one, and let's make this one 20, and we'll leave the bottom one all flippy like it was, right? So let's go ahead and push play, and let's walk over here. Let's shoot out the bottom box. Oh, look at that box. That box took a while before it hit the ground, didn't it? Let's see why the big one didn't, up at the top, didn't do it. Oh, because I didn't change the dampening. Let's say 50 for that box, 20 for this one. Oh, I'd put 50 on that one. Let's put this one back to 0.01. Okay, so now it's going to work the way I want it. It's important to add the features to the right box. So the bottom one should just flip out, and the two top ones should fall at a much slower rate. Notice that the one underneath fell faster, and the one up there at the top is still floating. So let's imagine that you're doing a game that is in outer space, and one of your special features is that you're allowing the player to change gravity. Right, like that becomes a tool in the game, right? So now it becomes like a puzzle game. Is there a way you can change physics to an object in the game in real time? I mean, yeah, any of these things can be changed in real time if you have a function that sets it up that way. So that'll be with blueprints and adding blueprints to these things later. But for right now, I just want you to show you where the thing is for the object itself, because the object is then going to, you're basically going to set up a three-dimensional volume, and in that volume you can change gravity or turn gravity off. And if you turn gravity off, then each one of the objects that are in that volume have to know how to deal with gravity, right? So we're showing you where the gravity is in the object first, so you can make those changes. So you can make objects that are heavier, you can make objects that fall slower, you can make objects that do weird things like this, right? And this is just literally from, what was it? It was like 2 settings, right? Let me hit escape. And let's click on the box. And the only things that we did was we made the box movable, right? And then we turned physics on, we gave it a mass, and then we changed its dampening. You still have all sorts of other stuff. Like for example, let's say you wanted to allow the box to fall to a certain point, but you didn't want the box to touch the floor. You could lock the position or tell it to only fall to a certain distance. There's also, you could also turn gravity off for the box, which would negate a lot of the stuff that we're doing here. So that's physics for each one of these objects, right? So we'll leave those boxes there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another platform, right? So I'm just going to go grab my 2 geometries, like so, do a Control W, grab these, pull them out, and now I have my second platform, right? So the first platform that we're going to create was for dealing with a static mesh and dealing with just the stuff inside physics and making the box movable, right? Now what we want to do is every time we hit one of these boxes or we walked into them, it blocked us, and it also stopped the box from going through the back geometry, right? So there's another thing, and if we look at, let's go grab another box. I'm going to go grab go to basics, grab another cube, put it on my new platform. Let's go ahead and make it movable, turn its physics on, give it a mass, let's say about 500. So that we've done, right? We understand that. We're not going to make it do any kind of crazy or linear dampening. We just want it to act normally. So I'm going to minimize physics by hitting the little tab right there. Okay. The next set of options that you'll see is collision. So the collision options set up other things inside the game. So basically when I bump into it, the reason why I don't just walk through the object is because the object is blocking me from walking through it, right? So for example, let me put this box a little bit further back. We'll push play. And if I walk up to the box, the box moves, but I can't move through the object, right? So the box is a solid to my character. Let's go to its collision. So we have the box selected. Scroll down in its details panel. We'll see that we have, well, let's look at what the box is. So we have 2 options here. One is called simulate hit events and stimulate overlap events. Now we'll explain that in just a minute. Just know that those options are there. And then there are materials that you can place on objects to make them act differently than what is actually set up with their physics, right? So if you need something to float or something like that, there are physics materials that you can add that do some really crazy stuff. From there, we have, can the character step on this? Can I walk on top of it as a character? Can I jump on it? And the options here is yes, no, or owner. Owner being whoever owns the object, right? So you may set it up to where there's slightly different conditions for different players. But in this case, can the character, myself, step on this box? Right now it's set to yes, and that's fine. The next thing we see is what's called collision presets. Now, right now, the way to understand collision presets is there are 3 things that an object can do, right? Either Well, as we've seen with the default, right? We walk into the static mesh and it blocks us, right? So blocking is one of the things that can happen, and you see it right here. There's the word blocking, right there. So it's blocking. The other thing we can do is we can overlap with the object. That means us and the object can occupy the exact same space in the game, right? So this would be something that would be let's say you're walking through a fog, right? A fog is an object. It's a cloud that's on the ground, but it allows you to be able to go through it, right? Let's say you were going, let's say you had a hologram. A hologram would be something that has a shape, right? A three-dimensional shape, but you run your hand through it and your hand can go through it. Fire would be another great example. I wouldn't recommend doing it, but if you have a lighter and you run your finger over it, there's obviously a shape to the flame, but your finger is allowed to go through it, like water, right? Water is another good example of an object that has a shape, but that you can occupy the same space in the game. So that would be the overlap. The ignore is they don't even see each other. It's like they don't exist, right? So in an ignore, it's like an overlap. They can occupy the same space, but no information is going to be generated by that overlapping. So what that means is when we look underneath collision presets, right now it's set to a preset. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch this to custom. So that opens up all the other options that we have there so we can clearly see what's going on. So right now it's set to custom. So we're going to look at the first option, which is collisions enabled. Now we have no collisions, right? So regardless of what we've got here, we're saying don't register anything. We also have query only, which means that there would be no physics, but that it might generate some information, right? Because maybe I walk into this fog, this object is a fog, and that fog can kill me. So the second I overlap with the fog, I want it to register that I created some type of an event or an overlap with this object, but I don't want it to do anything physically, right? I don't want the fog to move because I bumped into it. That would be weird, right? So you have query, which would give you information. You could have only physics, where you just want to be able to bump into the thing, but it doesn't do anything in the game, right? It doesn't create an event or it doesn't create an overlap. And then from there you have the ability to do collision and query, which is normally where I leave it as my default when I'm doing something like this. So I wanted to register that fact that I ran into it, and I also want there to be physics based off of the bumping into it, right? So collision presets, custom, first option, are the collisions enabled? Yes, we want information and the physics. Next thing is the object type. Now, what an object type is like the team that you're playing for. So a lot of us will remember in school, or you played, like, let's say flag football, right? And you'd have shirts, no shirts. Or if you played, let's say, Little League or something like that, right? Or if you watch sports, right? Every team is got like a uniform that they're wearing, and that uniform identifies them as the person on that team. So when they're on the field, you can clearly tell who's on team A and who's on team B, right? So what an object type for us in Unreal is like a way to identify teams. Right now this says physics body. Let's click on the other ones. We have world static, world dynamic, pawn, physics body, vehicle, destructible, or projectile. So those are the ones that are in there by default. Those words mean absolutely nothing. It could be team A, team B, team C, team D, team E, team F, team G, team 1, whatever, as far as the words that you're seeing there. So just because it's called physics body doesn't mean that it's doing anything. All it is a bunch of presets for how it is going to deal on it's on the team called physics body, and then physics body is going to be reacting to other members of other teams differently. Maybe things that are labeled pawn, it'll ignore. Maybe things labeled projectile, it will create an overlap event. maybe other things call physics bodies, it will block, right? So this is how this object is going to deal with other objects in the game. First, it has to be identified by what it is, what team it's playing for, right? And then we're going to decide in collision responses how this object, is going to deal individually with, let's say, things labeled world static. Things, because you see them right here. There's world static, world dynamic, pawn, physics body, vehicle, destructible, projectile, right? What were the teams we could play for? Static, world dynamic, pawn, physics body, vehicle, blah, 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 right? So the same list that you're seeing up here is the same list that you're seeing right here. So what you're saying is this object is a physics body, and it will, right now, the way it's set, block everything. So no matter what runs into it, it will block it. And to prove that, let's say we'll grab another cube. We'll drop that one on the floor. We'll drop another cube. We'll drop that one on the floor. And we will go to the collision settings individually for each one of these. I'm going to set them to custom. And this one, so this one is labeled as a physics body. This one is labeled as a world static. And this one will set to custom. And this one will set to vehicle, whatever. I click on them and I see that this one says it's blocking all. This one says it's blocking all. And this one says it's blocking all. So that means there should be nothing that goes through any of these boxes, and when any of these boxes touch, they will hit the other box without occupying the same space. So let's see if that's true. Let's go and push play. So I'm going to walk up to one of these. I didn't make them movable. So let's make that movable and make it physics enabled. And same with all the other boxes. So that one is movable, physics enabled. Click on this one, movable, physics enabled. Okay, good. Let's make this a little bit bigger so we can see what we're doing. Excuse me. Okay, so I'm running into it. I'm pushing it into the other box. They're not occupying the same space. They are indeed blocking each other. One box made the other box move. Let's see this one. Okay, same outcome. Now, let's say we go back to these boxes, and now very critical to understand what we're about to do is we need to understand what we are, right? Because we also, as a character and as a projectile, have settings as well, just like the boxes are that we are manipulating. So to get this, to understand where we are, I'm going to go back to content. We're going to go to first person BP. We're going to go to blueprints, and there they are. That's the projectile. Every time we shoot, this is what we're shooting, this little yellow ball. That's our Nerf ball, right? And then this is us as the first person character. So if I double click on first person character and I go to viewpoint, that's us, right? That's us when we're in the editor and we look at our character, that's what we look like, right? Now we have this wireframe box that's on the outside of us, right? If I click on that wireframe box, you'll see that what this is called is it's called a capsule component, right? And it's a collision cylinder. That's what it's there for. It's meant to register events of us running into things. So when we've been hitting those boxes, it's this pill-shaped form, this cylinder, that's actually hitting and creating the physical contact with the other thing. Not our arms, not the camera, but this thing, this wireframe tube. Now if I have that selected and I scroll down into the details panel, I will see that this also has physics and it also has collision settings. So let's see what we're labeled as, what team we're playing for. So if I scroll over and open up collision settings, we'll see that it does generate overlap, and we'll talk about that in just a second. And I'm labeled as a pawn, and currently I'm blocking everything. So that means us are labeled as a pawn. Let's go look at our projectile, right? So let me go and double click on the projectile, go over, we'll see 3 folders, right? Sometimes it'll open up in the event graph, go over to the viewport, and if we zoom in, aha, there's our Nerf ball, but our Nerf ball also has a wireframe mesh around the outside, right? So if I go to, that is also a collision capsule. So there is a round collision capsule. You can make the capsule circular, or I think there's a square one that you can add also. And then you can custom make one based on the shape of your object. And we'll explain that later. But for right now, just know that your first person character has like a pill shape that's around it. Every time you shoot a projectile, this thing's being generated, and each one of those capsules is the first thing that's going to hit the other object, right? Before it hits the yellow part, it's going to hit this. And that, if we look at it, also is set, let's see, it's a custom preset, and it's set as a projectile, right? So this thing is playing for the projectile team, while us as the first person, when we click on our capsule, we're labeled as a pawn. So now we know what we are, right? So let's go back to the game with each one of these boxes. So let's say what I want to do is I want these boxes not to interact when I walk into them, like I want to be able to walk through them, but I want my projectile to still affect them, right? So let's go to each one of these boxes. I'm going to go to the first one, and I'm going to go to its collision settings, and I'm going to look at it, and I'm going to say, okay, this one's labeled as world static. And I see that I have the option of, oh, there's pawn, right? I know I'm a pawn as the first person player, and I want that to ignore. I don't want it to register anything with me. Let's do the same thing with this one. So this one, and actually with this one, what we'll do is we won't be able to walk through it, but let's make it ignore our projectiles, right? So the first box, it's going to be like it's invisible to us when we walk through it. This box will be invisible to our projectiles, but it will still be blocking us. And the one in the back, let's make it to where it's actually going to ignore both the projectile and the pawns, right? So first box is just the pawn. Second one, it will ignore the projectile. And this one won't react to either one, but it will react to the other boxes, right? So let's see. Let's see if all that works the way we think it's going to work. So let's push play. So the first one we said was going to ignore us, right? So let's walk. Sure is, right? So it's ignoring us. It's allowing us to occupy the same space as the box, right? So let's go to this box. That box should be doing the same thing, right? We said ignore the pawn. So it is, sure enough, ignoring us. Now this box is still blocking us, right? So when I run into it, I can still affect it, right? Now, this one should still react to the ammunition, and it does. Remember, this box we said don't ignore the projectile, right? So, and I think the one in the back also is ignoring the projectile. Right? So neither one of those boxes got to see the projectile.
Overkill.
Huh? Oh, with the sound effects? Now, with the...
I know with the shooting, that was overkill.
Oh, yeah. I made sure it was dead. Now, remember that the boxes can still see each other, right? So if I bump into this box, that box back there should move. Right? So it is being blocked by the other box, but if I try to walk through it, it's ignoring me, right? Because we said overlap or ignore, completely ignore, right? This one still sees me, the other one doesn't, right? So let's look at that again. We set up 3 static meshes. We went into their details panel. We made them movable. Then we came down here, we turned their physics on. Then you can manipulate physics. I just left it on the default. And then what I did was I scrolled down to the next options box, made each one of them, as far as as a preset, a custom, right? Then I made sure that both query and physics were turned on. And then from there, I gave it a team that it's going to play for, right? Via one of the options that are there. Okay. From there, I decided how each one of those boxes was going to deal with other objects that are in the game, other meshes, and what teams they are labeled on, right? What teams they play for. So we saw that first person is a pawn. The capsule that we are engulfed in is a pawn, and the projectiles that we're shooting were labeled as projectiles. Okay. So before we move on, does everybody understand that? Does anybody have any questions, I should say, about what we just saw? About how to manipulate your collision presets?
Well, for mine will be complicated because let me put it simple. Ghost and physical body.
Do what? Say that again?
Basically, when the player is because I want to try something like when a player like is in ghost and form is able to face to some objects, but not every object. And yeah, for me, it's a big. Well, how am I going to do that?
Okay, so you want to create an object that looks like a ghost.
No, when the player is like in ghost form.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
and
yeah.
face to some objects, but not the ground.
Right. So if you don't want to be for example, let's do this. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to create let's say we'll create another one of these. So let's do a Control W. I'll pull that out, and then we'll make another one of these, right? So Control W and pull that one out. So I have essentially what looks like a wall, right?
Yep.
Okay. If I click on these, right now these are geometries. So all that stuff we talked about, it's out the window. It's not part of a geometry. We're going to have to convert these first into static meshes. So go to this, select the object, brush settings, create static mesh, right? I'm going to go ahead and put this in folder, and let's create a new folder, and I'm going to call this wall. And we'll call this wall 1. Alright. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the other one, right? Or actually, I don't even need to. I could just make a copy of this one. Control W. There we go. So we have two walls, right? I'm going to push play and I'm going to walk over to these two walls. And by default, I should be blocking by them, right? Well, actually, I'm not. Okay, right now they are ignoring both everything. So now I have a wall that I'm ghosting, right? So how do we do that? Let's click on the wall. Let's look at its settings. There's collision. Right now it's set to default. Set to custom. And if I hit custom, right now everything would go to block. Let's go to this one and let's do the same thing. Go down to where I see collision settings. Go to preset. Hit custom. Make sure everything is on block. Let's push play. And theoretically now I should not be able to go through that. Let's see why. So it's static. Physics is turned off. Collisions are turned off. Query is that. This is set up as a world static. This one is set up also as a world static. Query and physics are turned on. And it's set to block everything. So I'm just going to do that. Pop it back in. Let's do that. Pop it back in. Now we may also need to do, what's probably happening here is we probably need to do a build. So let's do a build path. And or a build, you know what, I'm just going to do a build. Build all levels. Let's see if that doesn't do it. Because sometimes you make the changes in the game, but the game doesn't register it, so you have to give the game an opportunity to be able to catch up with where you are. So we'll wait for that to finish. Shouldn't take too long. Give me an opportunity to take another sip of coffee.
Because yeah, my plan is to like the player object, like to be able to face through objects, like depending, for example, like a power up or something.
Yeah, and if you're doing something like that, that'll be something that you will have to change. Right now, we're showing you where the settings are, right? What you're talking about is taking the settings and doing something with them, right? Making them change later in the game, right? Which you can do. You can automate a ton of stuff in this. Obviously, there's all sorts of those sorts of things. But first, you need to learn where they are, right? So that's what we're showing you, where the collision settings are and what they are. I'm glad you guys are thinking outside the box and trying to take it to the next logical step, like I want to do this with it. But first we need to, and that will come. I don't want to get sidetracked and do that, and then we lose sight of like what we're actually doing. So let's see if this thing is still letting me go through. So I'll have to figure out why that thing is. So it's set to custom, player can step on it, it's being blocked by everything. I think the other thing maybe that I can do with this is set up what's called a blocking volume. So that's another thing that we can do with a static mesh. When the static mesh comes in, it actually doesn't have a let's see if we can double click on the wall. There's the wall. So there's nothing in this static mesh that's actually creating sort of like what we saw with our character, right? So if I click on the static mesh and I go, is it in physics? Nope. I think it's in, oh, right. Static mesh. I just saw it. Let's create a blocking volume. There it is. So static mesh, that's our wall. Go here, create a blocking volume. And you can create a rough, contoured. Remember I said that there's a way that you can go back and you can add a blocking volume to a static mesh, right? So here it is right here. And based off of which one of these you select, it'll create like let's say you had like a very unique shape, right? Like let's say it was a big, I don't even know, like a table, right? A table you would think that you'd be able to go underneath, right? Like your character might be able to go under the table. But if you create just a heavy contour blocking volume, what it's going to do is it's going to create a box, like a volume all the way around the table and not allow you to be able to go underneath it. Now, if you do the more it goes into this convex, the more it sort of shapes itself around the object, and the blocking volume becomes closer to the shape of the object, right? So let's just pick a light one, and let's do, so now one of these has a blocking volume and the other one doesn't, right? So let's go and push play, and so now I should be able to go through one object and not the other one. Oh goodness, why is that still not working? Click on this guy, create blocking volume. Okay, now let's see. Yay, there it is. Okay, so I cannot any longer walk through that static mesh. That static mesh is now solid, but I can totally ghost the other wall, right? So, and you can make that setting change later. So based on your idea, absolutely, you can make a wall where there's a certain section that's there. You can create a switch on the ground that when your character hits that switch, it makes the blocking volume go away or disintegrate or disappear or destroys it. In which case, then the wall is still there, but now your character can ghost it. If it's a mode like a power up, then what you do is while your character has that power up or that that special weapon or that whatever ability they've got, what you do is you make your characters ignore whatever team. And now all of a sudden your character, while they have that weapon or while they have that special ability, can walk through walls. Right? So definitely, absolutely, that you can definitely do it. All right, so we now have seen actually quite a few things. We have seen that you can grab static meshes, put them on the ground. You can apply to them mobility. You can apply to them different physics so that they react to the environment differently. They're either heavier or lighter. And then how they react to gravity by the dampenings that are there. You can also lock them to a certain position. So maybe when you hit them, they'll move left or right, but not up or down. I think also there are also obviously presets for that as well. And then the other thing, the big thing, is the collision settings, right? So we've seen now how we can assign an object, basically put it into custom. You do have other presets that are there, which basically just set that up, set this up to do certain things. Like if I was trying to do a block all, I could just hit block all of them are blocked, and it automatically drops me into a world static, right? Now, so the next logical step to this is to turn this thing into something that would harm us, right? Like some kind of an enemy. So the very first enemy that we create is what's called a stationary mine, right? So if you were to walk over, like, like a minefield, right? Like you walk over it, it's an explosive that's in the ground. You trigger it by stepping on it or rolling over it. That starts the detonation, and then it explodes, right? So that's very much earlier what we saw, that red box that I had. Let's see, where is he? Over here. I created one just to make sure that I could get everything working. And just like all the other boxes, this looks about the same, but if I walk into it, it explodes. Just like a stationary mine would, right? The mine would explode, the mine would disappear because it would have exploded, and you would see you would hear the explosion, and you would see some type of fireball with the flame or whatever coming out of it. So let's go back in and let's see that happen one more time. And indeed, we see all of those things happen, right? So how do we take a static mesh that we've been working on and create a stationary mine? Okay, so let's go ahead and do that now. Now, by the way, and see, you can actually see the blocking volume that was left behind that we created. Let me select the blocking volume so I can delete it, so we don't have just this invisible wall, which is another cool thing. You can create an invisible wall that way. There's actually, you can go to volumes and you can create what's called a blocking volume right there. You can just grab that, put it on the floor, and it's an invisible volume, just like we had. And you can shape it because it's a brush, so you can make it whatever size you want. So that's another way you can create. That would be another way. Maybe you could automate something, is you could have just a bunch of blocking volumes like this and disengage them or make them disappear or make them do something different. I'm going to delete it so it's not there. So let's make our mine. So shift, oops, undo, control W. Now in the assignment, as far as your assignment goes with this, you are going to make a collection of 5 of these platforms, and you are going to assign different settings to each one of these, different physics. So the first one will be the physics settings, so you'll create the different boxes with the linear and the weights. And then the other 4 platforms will be you going through and setting up like 3 boxes. Usually what I do is I put them like this. So I'll set them up something like that, like on top of each other, and then I'll give all boxes the same settings, right? So whatever I do to 1, I do to the 3. And then what I'll do is I'll write what I did in the background to each of these, right? So what does that end up looking like? Let's go to one of the videos because I don't want to spend a lot of time. But let's see if I can show you in the video. We see when we bring in a. So now. Yeah. So that's the first one, and I guess I do it in the second one. You might use a material. Let me see if I can find a place where. There we go. So sort of like this, as soon as it fuzzes, stops being fuzzy. So you'll see that I have a couple of different platforms, and you can see that there was like 4 different platforms, and you can see the writing that's on the wall of these platforms, right? So let me see if I can pause it somewhere where I can actually see what I've written on there. Come on. Oh, that was a good place. I should have just paused it right there. Okay, good. So you can see that the questions or the information that I have up there is what we've done, right? So the first one would be what is the mobility set to? It's movable. Is physics what's going on with the physics? They are enabled. What is the collision preset? Custom. Collision enabled. And then what I did was, what is it labeled as? And then how is it dealing with other things called world static, pawn, and then projectile, right? So how do we do this to this? Let me switch that back over to this view. So all you would have to do is come over here to your place actor, type in text, and you'll see that you get a text render. You can add that text render to your wall, and then with that object selected, you can scroll down, you can find where the scale for it is. Let's see, where's size. So the first thing would be what? Movable. Movable. Let's see, font size, something like that. Right now it's sort of in the wall a little bit. There we go. And I guess this should actually say mobility equals movable. Oh, well, I got a plus. Let's make that an equal sign. Okay. So when I go to each one of these platforms, I should see those settings. I'll make a small list. I think it's actually in the documentation. We'll take a look at it in a minute. But you would make this list in the background, and then that way, when you walk through when you're showing me your walkthrough of this level, you don't have to go into all the settings for those boxes, right? You can just show me what's on the back wall and say, this is a movable, it's on this one, it's blocking pawn, projectile, and this. And then when I hit it, we would see that those conditions would work for those. Let's say we made the next one over, and with this one, Control W, this one, let's say the mobility would not be movable. So we would say static, and then at that point it would be literally just a box, right? We could just bring that in. And now if I push play, the first one would say movable, the weights for each one of the different colored boxes, and then you would shoot it and you'd show me that that stuff is working. This one is labeled as movable. I can see that they are. This one is, its mobility is set to static. It's not moving, and that's obviously apparent when I shoot it and when I do it. So then I might have a third one over here that might be set to mobility, but then I have it blocking the person, like blocking pawn, but it is it is, let's say, overlapping or ignoring the projectile. So then I would shoot at that one, we would see the projectiles go through it, and then I would walk up to it, and we would see that when I walk into it, I bump into it, and the box does move. So you would have 1, 2, 3, 4 stations in addition to the one with the weights. So the first one is just weights and physics, and this one should be set up for collision settings. This one will be set up for a different set of collision settings. This one will be set up for a different set of collision settings, and this one will be set up for a different set of collision settings. And in each one, you can change things like the mobility, what object type what object type it is, and what it's doing between the pawn, the projectile, and really this could be one is movable, one is static, and then the other 3 are movable. And with the movable ones, you do one that doesn't interact with the projectile, one that only interacts with the person, and then one that interacts with both projectile and person. And there you have your 3, right? Your 3 different collision settings that we are trying to understand and create different boxes in the same level that have different collision settings. All right, so with that, we got 30 minutes to go and set up our bomb. Yay. Alright, so how are we going to create this guy? So let me go and make another one of these. 1, 2, Control W, pull that out. Let's flip it. And let's put it on the other side. Okay. I'm just going to hide this one back here because it's a working copy, so I don't want to get rid of it. So now I have another platform. On this platform, I'm going to create my first enemy character, the static mesh. Now, to create an enemy character, what I've done is I've gone back to content, and I've actually created a folder, right? So I've right-clicked in the empty space, new folder, and in that new folder, what I've done is I've called it A_enemies, right? So we have content, and I call it A, so it's always the first folder, right? So there's A_my stuff, and there's A_enemies. So there's my enemies folder. Now, once the folder's been created, because I don't want it just floating around loosely, we want to sort of like keep everything together in the same place, right? So once that folder's been created, we'll double click in it. Yours will be blank. Mine already has a working copy, the one that we saw. So what I'm going to do to create my enemy character is I'm going to right click in this empty space, and we are going to go to what's called a blueprint class. And we're going to, so these are all different objects that you can create in different conditions and things that can be brought into the game. And one of them is, so there's level, there's material, you can make a particle system, you can create an animation, we can add effects, we can create physics changes, blah, 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 we can add sounds. Those are what we're going to use to create our heads-up display for our health bars. But what we're going to do is we're going to go to Blueprint class. We'll click that. More options, right? So here's way more options, and these are the most common. But if we look down here, we literally have hundreds of different types of blueprints that we can create. So we're not going to talk about all of those because we only got 30 minutes left, and that would take forever. But what we are going to do is we're going to look at the distinction between an actor, a pawn, and a character. An actor is going to be something that's on the stage that can be that can act upon things. A pawn is something that is a little bit more intelligent, right? So it would have maybe some code that would be in it that would make it move a certain way or react to certain things. And then a character is going to be even have more stuff. So if let's say we were going to animate a 3D model, and that model was going to have animation, and that model more or less was humanoid, then we would use a character. And this is apparent by looking at the icon, right? So if you look at the icon, the actor is a circle. The pawn has a little bit more shape, right? It looks like a little snowman. And then the character's icon almost looks like a person, right? Like the silhouette of a person, right? So even in the icon, it's showing you the level of complexity that you can do with each one of these. Now, for us, what we're going to do is we're going to create a pawn, right? So we're going to click on pawn, and that's going to create a blueprint, a default blueprint pawn. Yeah, that's hard to say. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to call this S mine 2. Since I've already got one, this will be the second one I'm creating. And so now we have it. And we even see the icon. The default icon is a pawn. Remember the little asterisk is there because we have not saved. So I'm going to hit save just to go ahead and save it before I start doing any work. Now, right now this isn't anything. If we were to drag this out on the screen, all we'd see would be like a little ball, and that's it. So if we double click on this, we now have, depending on what screen it brought you to, you will have a viewport, which is showing you what the object is, and right now there is no object. This is just a default point of reference for the center of the object. Then you have construction scripts, which we'll not really get to in this class. There is maybe one or two that we'll make. I think the health bar has one, but there I think they're calling it something slightly different because it's in a heads-up display. But anyways, then we have what is called the event graph. And the event graph is actually the blueprint. So the viewport would show us what the object looks like. This one would show us special script that's been created for this object. And then this one shows us script that's going to be external to the rest of the game, right? So this is things that's happening inside like a blueprint inside the object. And then this is a blueprint based on how it's going to deal with other things in the game. So what we're going to do is first I'm going to go to viewport, and we need to add an object. We need to add a mesh, something that this thing is going to be. So if I look over here on the left hand side, I see this big giant green button that says add component. If I click on that, we get a list of different things that we could add to the viewport, right? So I'm going to scroll down until I see cube, and I'm just going to add a cube. So now we actually have a shape. So this thing now, if I dropped it on the floor, would not just be an invisible ball, it would be this little square, this little static mesh, just like we've seen other static meshes. All right, so now our object, now our bomb has a shape, right? It's a square. So now let's go make it blow up. So your event graph. This is where we're going to set up the conditions for this AI, for this pawn, so that when I, the pawn, the main character, or my projectile runs into this thing, it changes, the square disappears, it pops. Not really pops, it just disappears. It's no longer in the game. It's been destroyed as a square in the game. And then in its place, we get an explosion with a sound and the fire, and then that thing disappears. Otherwise, it will be left in the game and be an artifact in the game that if you run into it, it might stop your character from running into it unless it's been destroyed as well. So, logically, we think of what a stationary mine does, right? We walk over it, we step on it, it explodes, it has sound, light that is corresponded with it, and then once it's exploded, it's gone. It's no longer in the game. It would be used, right? So we're going to select those three things there, and we're just going to hit delete. Now, I have to select the cube because it's going to be the cube that has the collision settings that it's going to trigger the event, right? So with cube selected, I'm going to right click into the event graph, and you'll see that I get these two options up here. If I do not have cube selected, notice those two options are not there. Those two options are specific to the cube. So if I click on cube, right click in the blueprint, you'll see that they are now there. Now, the one that I'm looking for is in the first option, so I'm going to hit that little down arrow, which is going to give me 3 more options. And in the first set, I'm going to see collision, right, which is what we've been talking about, collision settings. And I'm going to go to the add on of a component begin overlap. So as soon as me and the object begin our overlap, the event will take place, right? So let's click on that, and we'll see that when we zoom into this, this has sort of like, its icon is like a little square with an arrow in it, meaning that something is happening, and it's a red color. Now that red color lets us know that it's an event. We'll explain what that means, and the event is when something happens, right? So when you think about the textbook definition of event, an event is the action of something happening, right? So when this object, the cube, which you can see in parentheses, begins an overlap with, and we'll define pawn and the other thing later, it's going to do something, right? So what we need it to do first is, we're going to need it to do two things. We need it to first turn into an explosion and then disappear, right? So because we need two things, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to the execute. You'll see that when I hover over this little arrow pointing out of the box, that it says execute. This is my execute. So if I left click and drag out, I get my little spaghetti spring. And if I let go of the left mouse button now, I get an options box. And this options box is going to give me options that I can do with from this point, right? So the option that I need is sequence. I need to set up a first do this, then do this, right? So if I type in just the beginning part of the word sequence, you'll see that it's underneath flow control, switch, sequence. I'm going to click on that, and now I have a box that has a first do this, then do this. If I want to, I can add more. I don't need that many, so I'm going to right click on there and say remove and remove, because I only need two things to happen. Now from here, we need the box to turn into an explosion. Now thankfully, Unreal Engine already has a sprite explosion with the sound built for us. Now, remember how we had actor, pawn, character? So we're going to turn this, we're going to go from there, we're going to go from the very first object, we're going to click out, and we're going to say, oh goodness, what is this? Convert to, or spawn actor, right, from class. And you'll see that we get sort of like a little round ball with like an explosion on there, like something's happening. And so it's underneath the option called game. So if I click on that, we get a blank actor. So we're creating something new that wasn't in the game before, right? Spawning something means to create it. An actor is what we're spawning. So right now it says none because we haven't selected one yet. So underneath class, if we scroll down far enough, we'll see one that is called explosion. Where'd it go? We can create a fog, we can create a bomb, we can create a lamp, we can create, there it is, effects, explosion. So blueprint, scroll down far enough, blueprint, effect, explosion. So if I select that, we now see that up here the name is changed for the bubble. So if you're looking for spawn actor, blueprint, effect, explosion, you're not going to find it. You're going to have to type in spawn actor, then in class select the effect explosion, and then the name of the bubble will change, right? Now from here we're basically saying, okay, create this explosion, but the game doesn't know where to create it. So we're saying spawn transform, like where is this going to happen? So if I click and drag out from here, what I want to do is I want to type in get world transform, right? So I'm getting the location in the world where I want this thing to transform, and you'll see that I have a list of things in parentheses. Now that is associated with different things that I've created, and one of those options right now is cube. That's the cube. That's us. That's the thing that we're bumping into, right? That's the thing that we want to turn into the explosion that we're just calling in. So I'm going to go ahead and, well, I clicked somewhere else. So let's draw that back out. Type in get world transform, select cube, and so now that's what we've got there. So we have when the thing gets hit, we want two things to happen. The first thing is that we want this thing to be turned into an explosion, and that's about as far as we've got, and we've told it to be in the same location where the cube is, right? So wherever the cube was, that's where we want this explosion to show up. So from here, remember I said that this thing comes in as an actor, right? So it comes in as an object in the game. If I don't destroy it after the explosion has, because visually it won't be there, but it will create a blocking volume that will then create like an invisible wall that your character won't be able to get through. So what we need to do is we need to also now destroy this actor, this explosion sprite that we brought in. So to do that, see the option on the back end of this of the blue box that is the explosion. It says create a return value. So I'm going to click and drag out, and what I want, and the option, the very first or the second option that I get is called promote to variable. Now what a variable is something that we can change, right? If you can vary it, it was in one state and now it's in another state. Now we want to name this variable because we're going to set up lots of variables later on, and we need to be able to identify this one. And let's say we have different things that explode. Well, we need to make sure that we delete the one for this one and not for something else, so we need to name it. So you'll see that once I've set the variable, in the variables option here underneath the components panel, or actually it says in my blueprint, components is up there, but this side of the screen, the left hand side of the screen, we get a box and we can name it. So let's go ahead and call this S-mine underscore expo, like explosion. And for me, this happens to be the second one that I'm making, so I want to call this one too, so it's unique from the other one. So now it's there. So once it's there, we've created it. We've basically said, once this thing's been created, turn it into this variable. Now that it's a variable, we get a list of different events that we can do with this variable, right? Because it's something that we can change. It's something that can be varied. So one of the options, and you'll notice that all of these are that little square with the arrow in it, which means it's an event. So when it comes in, it's going to be a red bubble. So on destroy. So when this thing is destroyed, we want this to happen. So that's the one that I'm going to click on. And so I hit the little plus button, and what it did was it dropped the event, and you'll notice that it already has on destroyed, and it has the name of my variable in there. And then what we want to do is we want to attach the destroyed actor, which is going to be this variable. So we're going to click from there, and we're just going to type in destroy. And that's going to give us the ability, see underneath utilities, to destroy actor. So if I click that, I clicked out of the blue one to get this box. You could have clicked out of the white. It doesn't really matter. The thing that you want to make sure is that both the blue spaghetti string and the white spaghetti string are both plugged in to this, right? So then that way they're both plugged in, because sometimes you plug it in and it only does one and not the other. But anyways, so now what we're saying, let's go back and look at our logic. When this object is overlapped, we want two things to happen. This is the first thing, right? And that first thing is that it's going to turn into an explosion sprite. Then it's going to do that in the location of where the cube was when we bumped into it. And then we're going to convert that explosion into a variable, so then that way we can actually remove it from the game, so it doesn't create an invisible variable that creates a blocking volume that our character can't walk through. So now let's do the second thing. The second thing is that, yes, we've told the explosion to show up, but we still haven't destroyed the cube itself. It's actually still there, right? Even though we've said this is where we want the explosion to show up, the cube, the thing that we bumped into, would still be there. So if we don't destroy this cube, we're going to keep being able to bump into the static mesh, and it's going to keep generating explosions. Now that might be something that you want as a mechanic in your game, but it doesn't work for a stationary mine, right? The second you walk over the stationary mine and it explodes, there's no more mine. So we have to get rid of it via logic, right? If we want to set up this kind of an ammunition or this kind of an enemy. So what I need to do now is off of the second node, I'm going to click and drag out, and I'm going to type in destroy. And this time, well, if I could spell destroy, And this time it's we could say destroy component. So last time it was a variable and it was an actor that we created, right? Because we created something new in the game. This time, because it's internal, we can just say destroy the components. Because remember, this is the components panel, and we can see that each one of these is a component. So instead of destroying the actor, I can say destroy component. So now we get a nice little function box, which is blue, and that is attached to the cube. And just for fun, what I like to do is I want to make sure that all of it's gone. So I will actually grab the default root, drag that into the blueprint, and then also make sure that it's destroyed as well, right? So now I have multiple things in one node. You can do this sometimes, not all the time. And let's see if the self doesn't allow me to be able to drag that in. That wouldn't make sense as a component because it wouldn't be a component, it would be itself. So we've destroyed the two things. So now let's look at our logic, right? Our logic says when this cube is overlapped, we want two things to happen. First thing is we want to create this thing called an explosion sprite, which was created inside Unreal. We want it to be where the cube was, so we're going to get the world transform. Remember, transform was X, Y, and Z, where you are inside the world, and we want it for the cube. Then from there, we're going to turn it into a variable because we need to be able to delete the explosion sprite from the game. So then that way it doesn't create an invisible wall. And as all that stuff is happening, after this has been triggered, we want to destroy the cube. Now, this is still not going to work, right? Because we have not set our collision settings yet, I don't think. So once I've done all this work, you'll notice that the compile there was a big X on it. So what I want to do is I want to hit the compile button to make sure that all this information is there, that it stays. I'm going to hit the save button to make sure that this is there, and then I should be able to X out. Since we're going to put this on a platform, I should know which one this is. Let's do that. Put it out. Oops. Leave it like, let's say like right there. And let's walk over to it and see if we can make this thing explode. Okay, so it's not quite working yet, right? Now, why is it not working? Collision settings. So if we have the bomb or the stationary mine and we have it selected, we can scroll down in its details panel and we can see that right now, and because this is an AI, if we click on self, we can see that there are some things there. There's collision settings. Let's switch this, and we don't have quite the same options, right? I look here and I go, wait, Martin, what's going on? Why is this not showing us what we want? Remember that this is an artificial, or it's a pawn, so it's not actually the mesh itself. If you want to select the mesh, if you have the object selected, you can see that self gives us a set of options that doesn't give us the collision settings the way we want. But if we go to cube is the static mesh, there's our physics, and there's our collision settings, right? So what we were seeing with the other boxes is still there. We just have to select the right component inside of our pawn to be able to get to those options, right? So we've selected the mine. Right now it's set to self. We're going to go to cube, scroll down, there's physics, there's collision settings. Now, what does it say in collision settings? It's blocking everything. Now, if it's blocking everything, it's not allowing for events to take place, right? So the event, and there are two ways that we can register an event. So an event can be registered as a hit, or an event can be registered as an overlap. A hit is a block. So if you have things blocked and two blocked objects hit, it will generate a hit event because they're hitting each other. They've hit each other, right? They're blocking, the other objects bounced off, but they've hit, and that hit is an event. The other thing is the overlap. So in an overlap, the object has to penetrate the surface of the object, and they both have to occupy the same space, right? So what did we do with our code? Let's see which one of those two we selected. We double clicked and we come in here and we said on component begin overlap. Now there was also, if we click here, right click, we go to add event, click on that, click here, and one of the other things is add component hit, right? So we could do this on an overlap, which would then be us going into the collision settings and switching them to overlap instead of block, or we can set this up on a hit, right? Where when this thing gets bumped, right, when it blocks something, then the event takes place. Honestly, at this point it doesn't matter, but the cool thing is that you can actually trigger two different things based off of two different conditions, right? Whether the object gets overlapped or whether the object gets blocked. All right, so I'm just going to select this one and hit delete. And what I'm going to do is going to go back to cube, and I'm going to go to, right now it's on a preset called block all dynamics. So I want to switch that to custom so I can make my own changes. And right now pawn is blocked, so it would not be generating an overlap event, it would be generating a hit event. So we're going to switch this to pawn overlap, and then we're going to switch projectile to also overlap. So when this cube overlaps with a pawn or a projectile, it will now generate an overlap event, which is what we told it to do. On component begin overlap, do these things. All right, so now that we've made changes, let's hit compile, save, close this box, and let's go see if we can get this thing to blow up with 4 minutes left in class. Hurrah. And there it is, right? So now it worked with the projectile. So let's go and change its collision settings, right? So I'm going to click on the box again. I'm going to select the cube, not self, but the cube, the static mesh. And this time I'm going to have it block the projectile, but I want it to only overlap when I run into it, right? So I can shoot it, but nothing's going to happen. But when I touch it, when I run into it, right? See, no explosion. And then when I run into it, that's when it explodes, right? So now let's do it to where it does it the reverse, where we can walk on it, nothing happens, but if we shoot it, something does. So I'm going to select the box again, select cube, scroll down, we're still in custom settings. I'm going to switch those back, right? And so now it'll only work with the projectile and not with us. So we'll push play. So if we walk over it, nothing happens, right? But the second we shoot it with a projectile, that's when it explodes. So you can see that you can set up many, many different types of conditions with just your overlaps, with your collision settings, whether things are being blocked or not. And there's still one more step that I'd love to show you guys now, but you can actually create your own team members. So just like we saw projectile, pawn, and whatever, there is actually a way in the game, and I'll show you this next Wednesday when we come in and we go a little bit further into enemy characters. We go into the next part. I'll show you how you can actually set that up, right? Where we can actually set up our own presets and then our own object types when it comes to collision, because you may not have enough. There might be hundreds of different things that react differently to different objects in your game, and you just don't have enough in collision settings, right? You'd go here and you go collisions, you look at object types and you go, well, that's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I need something like 15, or there's 20 different object types that I need in this game, because there's going to be 20 different reactions of different objects in the game to each other that I need this to work for. So hopefully this has given you a really, really good, and it is, it should be simple. I mean, this is it gets more complicated later, especially when we start setting up multiple conditions and multiple things and multiple enemies and different things. But this is like an introduction to blueprints. So if you can get this to work, you can feel, you can give yourself the pat on the back this weekend if you can get the stationary mine to work. And also, while we're talking about that, let me switch back over to this screen and go back here. And if we're looking at the labs, right, this what we talked about today was the stationary mine, Intro to Collision Setting Part 2 and Part 1. So Part 1 went over the physics and mobility. Part 2 goes over the collision settings themselves. And Part 3, or C3, is how to create the stationary mine. So if you need to go back and watch these videos, you can, and they'll step by step through you. And then this one, the next video, or the last enemy character that we're going to create as part of Lab 5, is what's called a homing missile. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that stationary mine with the explosion that it has, and we're going to make it dart across the room at us, or across the platform, when we, as the character, walk into a certain area in the game, right? So the enemy characters would be basically stationary mines that now have the ability to move, right? That's basically what a homing missile is a missile that sees you and goes towards you. And so we'll be able to set up at least 2 enemy characters by the end of Lab 5. This one doesn't move, this one does, and this one we would start seeing what would be the beginnings of what are called navigational settings. So I don't have that one up yet, but the navigational meshes will allow us to be able to set up zones that characters can walk in, or enemy characters can be in. So enemy characters on the 2nd floor don't come running towards you because you're on the first floor. You have to wait until you're on the 2nd floor, and you're in that navigational mesh before those characters at that part in your level start reacting to you. Sort of like a homing missile. If you're too far away, the homing missile is not going to try to attack you because you're not in its range. But as soon as you walk within a certain distance, or within a zone around the homing missile, it's going to activate meaning it's going to start moving towards you, right? So we'll take a look at that when we come back on Wednesday next week. And Monday when we come back, what we'll do is we will finish with the stuff that's in Group Project 1. And what I'll do is just go around to each one of the teams, each one of the groups, and say, what's the idea that you guys are coming up with? What is it that, or see how the groups are going. I don't really want to come up with the ideas because we haven't given up our ideas yet for the pitch, right? The pitch will be where each one of the groups would formally tell the other groups what they're working on. And so I don't want to do that, but I do want to tackle any issues that we might be having in groups. Now, the only other thing, and I know we're a little bit over time, would be how to turn things in. I don't see anybody turning in any projects, so Lab 2 can be turned in, Lab 3 could be turned in. Today we finished with Lab 4, which is lighting. Lighting is actually fairly easy, if you ask me, at least the base lighting. Later we can talk about how to make light switches and how to turn a light on and off, which would be through your blueprints, right? Which we're starting to now get into. That's why I didn't make that part of that lecture, because it would been a little bit more advanced than what we need. But definitely that I would like to see you guys start turning in your labs and making those videos available with the links to me. So since we've run out of time today, I'm not going to cover it now. What I may end up doing is making a small, an FYI video, and adding it to the FYI supplement videos on how to turn in a project. And maybe one I will do with the free stuff that I gave you, and then the other one I can maybe make another one for OBS. And then that way you'll know how to turn in projects. Now, the other thing ultimately that you could be doing is remember that projects are not due until November 11th, or whatever date. It's way into the future. By the time we should already be in class, right? So if you don't want to make the videos, you can wait until we show up for class, and then you can show me your projects in real time with me there. So then that way you don't have to make the video. But that's an if. I'm still not sure. I haven't seen any changes. What I do normally is I'll go here to this little top corner right there, and I look to see if the last one is this one, right? So it still is the September 1st update that we got. So as far as I've heard, or haven't heard, everything is still going to be reopening on October the 4th. So if everything goes according to plan and the world doesn't freak out again, you'll be able to, in class, show me that you have completed lab 1, lab 2, lab 3, lab 4, lab 5, lab 6, whatever lab we're up to into that date. So we can do it that way also. So you don't have to turn projects in, but I would like to see that you guys are getting the information, that somebody understands. It's like today I was sitting here, I started the Zoom call at 11:30, and the first person didn't show up till like 11:45. So in the back of my head, I'm like, did the link work? So I'm thinking, do they understand how to turn in projects? And it's do I need to give them more information, or is it clear enough, or they're just not doing it, or they don't know how to do it? So that's what. So we'll do that on Monday when we come back in. We'll go over how to turn in the projects, and if I have been able to create a video, I'll drop those in the FYIs. If my weekend becomes tremendously busy and I don't get a chance to do it, then we'll definitely cover it for sure again on Monday on how to turn in the video and the video links, so I can start grading projects or your labs. So if you guys have no further questions, that's all I have for you today. You're free to go. I do have private lessons at 5 o'clock at Guitar Center, so we need to wrap up, let's say, by 3:30, and that'll give me enough time to get everything ready for me to go to work. So if you have some individual questions, I'll take them now. If not, we'll see you guys on Monday. We'll finish the information for Project 1, and then we'll go group to group and figure out where you guys are in the process for Project 1.
I have a question.
Absolutely.
If I've done lab 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, do I turn in lab 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or I just turn in lab 6?
So here's the thing is I need to see the skills in each one of those. And remember that I don't want to watch 25 minutes of you walking around your level trying to explain this is part of lab 1, this is part of lab 2, this is part of lab 3. So what I want are individual videos for the checklists that I have for each one of those labs. So lab 2 will be, here's my environment, here's the ocean area, here's the forest area, here's the house that I built, because all of that would have been part of lab 2. Then lab 3 would be whatever lab 3 was, and 4 would be the lighting. So in lab 4 you'd go through, you say here's lab 4, this is my name, this is lab 4, here's outside lighting, here's inside lighting, there's the stars, this is what I did with the clouds, and in less than 5 minutes.
What if my entire level is at lab 6?
Right.
Should I
So
still go over it?
you can still do you can still like right now, let's say I'm here, right?
Yeah.
And I've gotten to the point where I'm doing the boxes, right? Well, okay, so if I'm going to do the video for lab 1 or for lab 2, what I'd probably end up doing is moving my character here to the start point, which is where it would have been for lab 2. And I would push play and I'd say, hi, my name is Martin. This is the demo for lab 2. This is the little hallway you told us to do. Here's the boxes that you told us to stack up. This is my house. You can see that it's a 2-story house. Let me walk in. Yeah, sure, the lighting's already there, but here's my staircase, which was one of the things that was on the checklist for it. You can see that I have furniture packs and blah, blah, blah in my house, which is what you asked us to do as far as downloading furniture packs, because blah, blah, blah. Here's my window. This was part of that. Let me hit escape. Let me zoom all the way out. Let me show you my big giant landscape that isn't in a perfect square, which is what Martin asked for. You can see mountains. You can see that I have my paintbrush, that I've painted the mountains using the paintbrush tool. Let me select my landscape. With the landscape selected, let me go over. Here's the paintbrush that we created. Here's the snow level. Here's the grass level, here's the this level, there's the invisibility mask, which is part of that, and whatever, right? So basically, do you want to make a change? No. So basically, now with that, I can go back to, let's say, lab 1, even though you're in lab, whatever lab you're in, and go through the checklist. So there's the checklist for that video. And you literally go, okay, so there's 2 geometries. I created a house, whatever. There's the floor. Oh, show me your world outliner. So if there's any of these things that you missed, right? Like if you didn't show me in the video, I'm going to assume that it wasn't done. And I'm going to take points off for that. So this is how I'm grading. Because I can't grade on how awesome your level looks. I can grade you on, did you do this, did you do this, did you do this? And so basically these walkthroughs are the did you do these? And if you look at this prior to starting your video for lab 2, you'll know exactly what to show me in that video. And I can then check you off for those things.
Gotcha. That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Should have
Yeah.
recorded that and made that the video right there.
Well, it is. It's actually in the. I could probably go back to the stream and just cut that little part off, and then make my own little FYI from the larger, because we're streaming right now to my YouTube page, so it is recorded. So yeah, thanks for.
Main question.
Yeah. That's how you would basically do that. So then that way you could. I can see each one of them. It's not convoluted, and I'm not going like, oh, which checklist am I on? What skill is he showing me right now? And they stay short because you have a list. You can go boom, 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 boom. Done. Video's over.
All right.
Cool.
You've answered my question.
Awesome. You got it, bud. All right. Any other questions? Got a couple more minutes.
Yeah, you said before about regarding.
Speak up a little bit. You're very soft right now.
Yeah, sorry. You said something about PC properties.
Okay. So what are you still trying to figure out?
No, I'm just trying to get the information about the processor.
Okay. So if you go down to the bottom where you have your toolbar, you will have something that looks like a little folder. If you click on that folder, it opens up your World Explorer, and then you go over here to this PC, right click, go to Properties. That will then tell you what your processor is. Once you know what your processor is, so mine happens to be an Intel Core i7, this one. I'm going to copy. And then you go to the internet and you paste it. Let me see if I'm in the right there. I'll hit enter. Okay.
I only showed the AMD Ryzen.
Yeah, I don't know. There's like 100,000 different processors out there with all sorts of different speeds. I'm the most familiar with the Intel because throughout my life that's sort of the chip that was the default chip. I can tell you that Apple's gone through Motorola chips. They were doing Intel Max, and now they're making their own chip called the M1. So Apple's actually making its own processors now, or before it was using other people's processors. I know that you have Intel as one company, AMD is another company, but there may be a number of other companies that are out there. So I can't tell you exactly which one you have in your computer, but based off of that information, you should be able to do a Google search and find more information about your chip. The thing that you're most interested in finding out is what the maximum expandable RAM is for your computer. Now, if this is something that you can't do or it becomes too difficult, you can always take your computer, since you said it was a laptop, take it to Micro Center, walk it into the front door, or just right when you walk into the front door to the right-hand side, there's a thing called the knowledge bar. You sign in, and then you talk to, like going to the Geek Squad at Best Buy, sort of the same thing, except I feel like these people are more knowledgeable. I think they have to have degrees in microcomputer technology or something to even work in that part of the store. So it's not somebody that just got hired and moved up. And you show them your computer and you say, I want to know what the maximum amount of RAM is that I can put in this computer. They'll open up your computer, do exactly what I'm telling you to do, and then tell you this computer's maxed out, or you can add up to a certain amount of RAM. Now, you happen to be in Micro Center, so if you're at Micro Center, they would point you to the back of the building, which is the BYOB part, or the build your own computer part, and they would say, this is the RAM you need, tell them to give you this, bring it back to me, and I'll install it for you. And then that way you don't even have to get your hands dirty. So if it becomes an issue and computers is not your thing, You can pay other people to do stuff for you. I think the reason why you're having problems with your computer is because you're running antivirus, you're running the software, you're trying to run the computer, and it may not have a processor fast enough, and it may not have enough RAM. And because you're telling, it's like basically putting, like me, I've been doing a lot of moving dirt around in the backyard because I have a little garden, right? If I have a wheelbarrow and I put 1 ton worth of dirt in there, me is not going to be able to move that because I don't have enough power in my body to move a ton worth of dirt, even if it is in a wheelbarrow. And that's what you're asking your computer to do. You're trying to get your computer to move mountains when it has, a small engine inside of it. So if you can make the engine bigger, it would be my assumption that it would make the process better and that you would have more processing in your RAM to be able to work. Now, the other big thing would be to figure out what your processor is doing. If you can figure out what your gigahertz are, so if I go back here to, let me go back, let me go back to this, and I can right click on it and go to properties, and I can see there that this is what my gigahertz are. So this computer happens to be running 4.2 gigahertz, which is really good. I can show you, let's say, let me go to my other computer, and I'll do the same process, right click, go to, there it is, so I click, go to this PC, right click on it, processor. This one's my laptop's only running 2.3. So the processing power, the maximum speed of this computer, my laptop, is only 2.3 gigahertz, where on my desktop it's 4.0, right? So because of those two things, this computer, the laptop, the desktop, has less RAM. It only has 32 gigs of RAM on it, but the other computer has 64 gigs, so they sort of even each other out. Right? So in one computer I have more torque, but I have less overall speed. In the other computer I have more speed, but I have less torque.
You can also find this information if you click on task. If you right click on your Windows bar and click on Task Manager and go to Performance, it now shows you exactly what you have.
Yeah, you can right click on your toolbar and go to Task Manager.
You could try that, and then you click on Performance tab, and it'll say like your exact specs, like what you have, and like how many slots of what your maximum allowable stuff is.
I don't think it actually tells you what your max RAM is. I think it tells you what's installed, but it doesn't tell you it may tell you how many slots are there.
That's what it does. It tells you your slots. Yes, that's correct.
Right, but it doesn't tell you, and that's the thing that we want to find out is if his computer is expandable, and that information would be from finding on the motherboard, because it's the motherboard that limits how much RAM you can use, based on the processor that has been designed for that motherboard. So you need a couple of pieces of information. It's like if you're taking your car in, is it an automatic? Is it a manual? Is it 4-wheel drive? Is it 2-wheel drive? Do you have a V12? Is it a V8? Is it a V6? Is it a V4? All those things are going to make differences on how the car interacts and what it does, right? And so that's the same thing with the computer. Here we're looking at all the different parts, and what we're interested in is the processing power of your motherboard versus whether processing power of your CPU versus whether the motherboard can handle X amount of RAM. If those two things click up, you can get up to a certain point, and you would be able to expand. I've had people that have brought me computers, because I do a lot of this. I had a customer who was doing DJing last week or the week before, and we got to a point on his mixer, and we hit a button, and all of a sudden all the audio went for like a second, right? And it looked like his computer froze, and I was like, "Whoa, that's not good." And I go, "That's probably low RAM." So then we went and we did the exact same thing. We found that his computer was only running 4 gigs of RAM. And at 4 gigs of RAM, when we tried to run 3 effects processors at the same time while 2 songs were playing, the computer didn't have enough RAM. So what did it do? It had to slow down the packet count until it could catch up to where it was. And that means that you tried to push the computer, let's say, to 200 miles an hour, and the computer can only do 100, and it's just coasting until it can get back to 100 because it's not going to give you 200 because you're pushing it that hard. And so what happens in a computer world is the computer cracks, and you get in audio cracks, in video, or in your case, the computer, the software just can't even work because there's just not enough power in the computer to be able to do it. So I think RAM, if your processing power on your chip is anywhere between 2.4 to 4, you're fine on your processing power. If it has more cores, that's better. So if you're dealing with a 4-core or an 8-core, the 8-core would be better. So yeah. So the other thing too is next time this happens, do use your phone to record it. Show me actually what's happening and what you're running, because that'll give me more information, and I might be able to, especially if does it just crash, or does it give you a message before it crashes?
Gave me a message after it crashes.
After it crashes. So like when you're trying to reopen it, it says the system crashed. Okay. Next time, right? Next time that happens, and you get that little dialog box that shows that it crashed, take a picture of it with your phone, and then copy down the error code, and then take that error code and do the same thing. Do a Google search for Unreal Engine 4.26 error code, and then write in the error code, and see what it's giving you, because it may be something else. I still think it's low RAM, but it could be lots of other things. And maybe, and you know, you don't have to figure it out on your own. That's why you do research. You go online, you go to Google, you go to Reddit, you figure out what other people, because trust me, even me, there's much smarter people than me that have probably gone through this, and they experienced it, and they went, oh no, this is happening, let's try to fix it, so then that way if somebody else has the same problem, they'll know what to do.
On COD that, oh, my cruise missile, it doesn't actually go faster than it was.
Right. So yeah, a lot of different factors are coming into play, and this is good. I mean, if you're getting into a technology or a business that has to deal with technology, I can tell you the only reason I know so much about all the computer stuff is literally I'm in a room with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 laptops, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 desktops, and that's just this room. And right. And so the more experience you have with something, the easier it becomes, and the more you see a problem. The first time it's a big problem. The second time you're like, oh, I remember, what did I do last time to fix this? And then by the time you've seen that problem 10 times, you're like, oh yeah, it's just boom, boom, done. And you don't even think about it anymore. But yeah, the first time you run across a problem, it can be a big problem. And especially with this kind of stuff, with gaming and creating content like this, being a good problem solver and being able to figure out a problem on your own. For example, I'll give you an example. I was working for a wedding company, and at the wedding company, we had made a video, because we make videos for people when they get married, and the lady had asked for a single disc but dual layered, right? Which is something you can do on a DVD. You can have a single layered, double layered. You can have single layered, double layered, and you can have front and back. So DVD can then flip upside down and you get more content. Now, the advantage of this is obviously more time, right? One DVD gives you about 2 hours worth of content from start to finish, like if you read across the DVD and the space that's provided. But let's say your movie is 3 hours long, right? Like you're doing one of the Star Wars movies. Well, somewhere in the disc you have to make more information. Well, you can't make more information. What you can do is create another level. So within the disk itself, there's like a first layer and a second layer, and then you can put the rest of the information there. Now, fine, we can do this, but it's not something we did all the time, right? It's the first time we had actually been asked for a single layered, double layered single disk, and we were like, oh, okay, cool. And so my boss kept trying to make one, and it kept putting the point where it switched from one layer to the other layer, it'd be like in the middle of something. It'd be like somebody talking, oh, my daughter, blah, 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 I'm so happy for, and then and then it would go and it would continue, but you'd see like a little hiccup, like a 1 second hiccup when the laser was going from the first layer to the second layer. So my boss is like, dude, how does Hollywood do it? I know they do it. I know that they can put it in a certain place. And then I thought about it. I was like, you know what? Beautiful. I'm going to, while they went to lunch, I sat there and I went to Google and I typed in single disc or single-sided dual layer disc changing point in, and then the name of the software that we were using. Took me about 20-30 minutes to find that somebody was like, oh yeah, we run across this problem before. Basically what's happening is that the system arbitrarily puts it in the middle. So it looks at the disk and it goes, this is half of the disk, this is the other half. One half I'm going to put on one layer, one half I'm going to put on the other layer. So what we had to do was, there was actually, like when you're sequencing out the video, you can put points in so that you can put like chapter markers in the DVD. And all we had to do was change one of those chapter markers to also, there would have been an option in that marker to make it the point where it switches from layer 1 to layer 2. I came back in, they came back in from lunch, and I go, all right, open up your project, do this, do this, do this, and then burn it. An hour later, the thing was burned. We ran through it. Sure enough, it worked. And he was frustrated. He had been working on it all morning, but he was trying to do it a certain way. I went, did research. 20 minutes later, figured it out because somebody else had to do it and figured it out, and they put that information online. So more than you coming to me as the only source of information, the whole internet is a source of information, right? So if you can't figure something out, don't wait until next class and then ask me. See if you can't figure it out on your own, right? Now, granted, you're coming from a position of not having 20 years of maybe experience with computers like myself, or the same kind of experience that I've had, right? So everybody's experience will be different, but the way we solve a problem is to first identify the problem, figure out what the problem was. If it's giving you an error code, that's the problem. And then you have a point of reference to start looking it up. And at that point, every problem is the same thing. If I have a problem and I don't know how to solve it, I need more information. And so you go online, which is the largest information. I mean, literally we have, I forget what it would be, like quadrillions of terabytes of stuff that are out there on the internet. Most of it's garbage, but if you know how to research well, and you know where you've had, and this is why I can find stuff quickly, because I know where to look, because I've had to look 100 times for 1,000 different people, right? And so I've just gotten good at looking for things, and then because I'm doing audio, video, graphics, I can see how different companies in different things deal with certain problems. And because my job was HCC work as a lab aide, which was you walk into the lab and they're having a problem and you got to figure it out for them. And then I did that for audio, video, and graphics. And then I started as a teacher, and now I teach privately. So my whole gig is people come in, they have a problem, I need to try to fix it for them. So I've gotten really good at researching. So the thing would be doing research on your own. You have the problem, you have Google. It's about typing the right question in and seeing if you can filter through the crap to find the information that will fix your problem.
Sir, I recommended to make a series about where to search that type of information, like in YouTube.
No, because that's information searching, and that has nothing to do with what we're doing. What I'm doing is I'm giving you a way of thinking and a way of coming up with a solution. You have a problem, you have a source of data, which would have been a library, could have been videos, could be YouTube, source of data, and you filter through that source of data to find the information that you want. I can't make a video on that because every problem is going to be unique. He's having a problem with an error code, you're having a problem with a blueprint, she's having a problem with something else, right? And so all I can do is I can say, this is the process for solving a problem. Identify the problem, find a data point that you can then start researching on. In his case, the data point would have been the error message that he was getting. In your case, it might be something else. So you find that data point and then start doing your research and seeing what other people have come up with. But that's a very simple thing. I mean, a lot of us should be doing that. If anybody's ever asked you to like write a paper, that's what you're doing, right? They're saying, here's a paper. This is what you need to write about. Go find information, fill in the pages. Except for us, it's not going to be a paper we're turning in. For us, it's going to be a solution to our problems. So you should know how to research. All college, all high school and middle school, that's all you should have been doing. That's what book reports are for. They show you how to do research.
Professor, I have a question.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Into lab 2 and through lab 6, all the labs, how many minutes that we need to, for the video that we need to take for introducing our work?
So each one of the videos that you create needs to be less than 5 minutes long. There should be one video for each lab. Except for lab 1, because lab 1 it was just me introducing Unreal. The only thing we did in lab 1 was create the 5,000 by 5,000 environment and put your name on the wall, and then create the walls to make sure your character couldn't fall out. But if you go into lab 2, I'll clearly see that that's there.
Yeah, I see. But what about the errors that we have?
So what do you mean? What do you mean by errors?
I'm just saying, like, what happened, like, if there's an error about...
So give me an example, because if you say give me an error, I could think of, like, my mind just starts going in 100,000 different directions. Like, error can mean anything. Be more specific. Like, you're creating your video or you're creating your project and you have an error. Like, where does the error take place?
No, like, when I save my project of it, when I save my project,
Yeah.
this error keeps on...
Okay, so what error are you having? Does it have a name? Does it have a number? Does it have a something like a bubble that pops up, a window that tells you what the error is?
Yes, it is showing what the error is.
What is it?
Find it in my first person exam map.
Okay.
I think it's a like pathway error because that happened to me with 3D Max because the antivirus is blocking it and I have to log in as an administrator, so it doesn't show that error.
Is this in Unreal or is this in some other program?
This was another program, but it was the antivirus was blocking the pathway, like to save the project.
Could be. Yeah, the antivirus have gotten very aggressive and they're blocking a lot of stuff. So every time something happens, you sometimes need to tell the antivirus that it's okay for this program to do what it's doing, that you authorize it. But I don't know if that's so. You're saying you're trying to save it, and this error message comes up, and you can't save your project.
Well, that, yes.
So every time you work in your software, when you finish at the end of the day and you try to save, you can't, and so every time you have to rebuild it.
For that, yes.
Okay. Again.
I'm sorry, let me finish mine. Like, in my files, I only got like 2 of my lab. Like, it says 4.26 and now 4.26.2. Right now I'm doing James Labs 4.26 minus 2 or part 2 whatever. But the other labs, I hadn't touched them yet. So I'm still working on this one.
Okay. So what are you concerned about? That you don't have enough time to turn in your labs? Or that I'm presenting too much information and you're not there where I am?
Oh no, I was there.
Okay. So what you're saying is in your own work, what you've been able to do is complete labs 1, labs 2, right?
Right.
And you're trying to work on, I assume, lab 3 now?
No, lab 2. I'm still lab 2 on there.
Okay, so you're still on lab 2, right? And you are able to save project 2, and when you go back to your project, you can open it, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so the issue becomes what? I'm not understanding. So if you are able to, because you said you were having a problem saving, correct?
Well, I was about to save it, and trying to do something emergency of it. And I need to come back and then I'm still trying to do it.
So it's saving and it never finishes saving? Or it locks you out of your computer when it's trying to save? Hello?
I know, I'm still here. I'm just, it's like, it's hard to
Describe what your situation is?
yes.
Okay. Let me do a screen share. Are you trying to do this right now on the computer that you're on the Zoom call with?
For right now, I'm in here, yes.
Okay. So if I do a screen share, can you share me the screen that you're working on?
Sure.
Okay. Well, I just made screen share available. So go ahead and scroll. I believe it's scrolling up to the top, and then say share screen.
Below, right?
Or below, yeah, wherever it is. Sometimes it's above, sometimes it's blue.
Like you can see it?
Yeah. Okay. So this is the level that you're working on, right? And this is the equivalent of what would be lab 2.
Yes.
So go up to File, go Save. Click Save All. Okay. Now you also need to see the other save. Click on that one. So that saves the level, that saves the map. And then scroll down to the very bottom over the content browser and hit Save All there. So now you've saved the entire project. I don't see any error messages.
No, that's the point. Like yesterday, I was trying to save my work on it by helping my own brother of it. But there's something strange about this error on it. That's not trying to save. Like it cannot save of my project that I'm working on.
Okay, so you have to be more specific. I just saw you save 3 places. So you're saying when you close the project file and you reopen it, it didn't save?
Yes, that was yesterday.
Okay, is it happening now, today?
But to me, I'm not sure.
Okay, well why don't you try closing the project file and reopening it and seeing if we have the same problem?
Let me exit.
Alright. Okay, so now you're out. And you don't need to create a new project for each lab.
No, it just happens.
Okay.
Like,
You started over again, so this one's called part 2.
yeah, that's.
Gotcha.
I was trying to go back in there, and I suddenly click add more of it, accidentally of it. So yeah, this is what happens.
Now you have an awful lot of pages open up there.
Yes,
All that takes up internet space and RAM.
Yes, yeah, you see that.
Yes, we do.
But I don't know what to do with this too. Like leave it there to wait for another project.
Okay. So it looks like you opened it up. It looks like it left us in exactly the same position that we were. And it looks like everything's saved.
Let me just try this again on it. Just trying to make sure.
Well, you didn't change anything, so you don't need to save anything.
Is it okay to show you my screen so I can show you what I'm doing with my own Unreal Engine?
You want me to you want me to see your project?
Yeah, but still, I still have a long way to go with it.
Okay. What kind of issues are you?
I'm sorry.
Okay. Stop sharing yours. Just let the other gentleman come in.
Yes, I'm sorry, Professor. I just trying to make sure that
No, that's
we're
cool. That's cool. But you
trying
can
to
do that
solve.
without me watching. If you have a problem, then you can share your screen again. Hamid, do you want to share your screen real quick so I can see what you're doing with your project?
Okay. Professor, I have to leave on right now.
Yeah,
Just
I'm actually running a little bit behind too. I need to get out of here soon too, because I need to be at work in about an hour and 20 minutes.
Hey, Professor.
Okay,
all right. Yeah, you have a nice day, Professor.
you too. Y'all take care. We'll see you guys on Monday. Over the weekend, just keep working on your lab, see how far you can get.
Yes, but I will let you know, like, send the messages in Canvas if I have some errors.
Okay, let me know. And the best thing to do is actually do a video of it. So instead of trying to explain it, you can actually just show me, which is a lot easier.
Yes.
Okie doke.
Have a nice day.
You too, bud. Take care. Best of luck. All right. I can see an environment. I can see a couple of square blocks. So you want to zoom out so we can see the whole thing?
Yeah, that's right. I have to go zooming out. Oh,
Okay. So what are the problems that you're having? Because it seems like what are the issues?
I don't have any issues. I just want to know that this is what I want to build as a house, and I just want to make sure that it's not too big, it's not too small.
Dude, that's totally. I mean, here's the thing. I can't micromanage your entire project because I would have to micromanage 17 people's projects. The thing that's the most important is when you cut the door, can your character walk in and is it bumping its head? If your character can't walk in the door hole that you created, well, then it's wrong. If you create a space that is too small for your character or looks like you're the size of a mouse, then it's wrong. If you're trying to create something that looks realistic, right? So the point is, we all have experience with buildings. You've walked into a house hundreds of times, or apartment buildings, or skyscrapers, or whatever building you've walked into. You have in your collective mind the answer. You know when you look at that and you walk through it, is your character able to walk through without having to duck? Is your character able to walk through and it doesn't look like there's 5 miles between the ceiling and the top of your character's head? So the best thing to do is push play, walk up to the object that you created, that box, the gray one, and then see if your character is big enough. And remember that I did give you instructions as far as like your character is 200 by 200 by 50, right? So that's the height, width, and length of your character.
Why it won't let me play?
Because you probably have a lot of stuff running and you have low RAM. Look at your clouds. See how they look choppy? I can already tell that's low RAM. You're running Zoom, this, a YouTube video, and your antivirus is running in the background with 8 gigs of RAM. Your computer just doesn't have enough power to be able to calculate what you're asking it to do. Or it's slow. I can tell you when I first started doing video work back almost 20 years ago, my first computer was a Mac, a Mac notebook, those white ones. And
I was kind of blocking my character. That's why.
yeah. And I would render a video that was 20 minutes long and it would take all night to render the video. Now I can do a 20-minute video in 2 minutes. Yeah, that's low RAM, Bubba. That's what you're experiencing right there. That choppiness, the blur, is low RAM. That building is too big if you're doing it as a single-story building. Single story should be, if you want dimensions, if you want it's 1000 by 1000 by 300, or 1000 by 400 if you want higher ceilings. That building, hit escape, hit pause. You can also hit the escape key on your keyboard. Click on the building. Where's your details panel?
No, that's what I've been using as a detail. That's what I was using.
That's not your details panel. Your details panel, are you using a dual screen?
No.
So you have a single screen?
Yes.
Okay, go up to the very top. See where it says Unreal on the top left-hand side? On your toolbar. Keep going, keep going. There's File, there's Edit. Go to Window. Click on Window. So that right there are all the different windows that you're not seeing right now. So if you want, see the second window from the top is called Details panel. Details. Click on Details. For second panel from the top. Second option from the very top.
Yeah.
Details.
Okay, click on the detail one.
Yeah, click on Details 1. Let's see what that looks like. Ah, there's your Details panel. Now, where's your Browse window? Go back up there. Go back up to Windows. Okay. So, you have something, what's the window we're looking for? Place Actors. See the window? It's about halfway down. Click on Place Actors.
There we go.
So now you should see the other stuff that we're seeing, right? So now you have access to everything. So anytime because these windows can be closed, because you might want to see more space on something else. And this is just standard when we're dealing with programs like this, that you're working on like visual stuff, because you might need to see the visual stuff bigger, and then options may not be as important. So that's why you're able to like move the windows around and resize them, and get rid of windows when you're not using them. But you need to know where to go back to get the windows. So now that that box is there, you can scroll down in the Details panel on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side of your screen, and don't do it that way. And the other thing is that also looks like a basic. It's not a geometry. You don't want to use basics because you can't hollow out a basic. A basic is stuck. Okay, go over to the right-hand side of your go to the left-hand side of your screen. You see over there, right now you're in Basic. Go down to Geometry. Click on Geometry. Expand the box out so you can see it. There are the geometries that we're using. Click on Box. Drag a box onto the screen. Okay, now on the right-hand side, go over to the right-hand side to the Details panel. You see where it says Brush Settings. If you stretch an object and you want to later put a material on there, the material will be stretched. If you change the actual units of the box, when you put the material on the box, it won't be stretched. This is why we do the house with a geometry, because with the geometry, I can control all these factors, right? Now, stay in Brush Settings. Make your Z-axis 300. Make your X and your Y-axis 1,000 apiece. Go to the X, make it 1,000, and go to the Y and make it 1,000. Yep. X and Y are 1,000 each. Z is going to be your axis. That's the one pointing up. So when you look at these colors, right, you have red, green, and blue. The X is always going to be red, the green is always going to be Y, and the Z is always going to be the blue one, right? So even if you rotate this box and the Z-axis is no longer the Z-axis, you can still see which one you're manipulating by the color. Alright, now grab your box, drag it way up into the air. Grab that blue arrow, go to the blue arrow, not the point in the middle, but the blue arrow up at the top. Click on it and drag your box up. Okay, now on your keyboard, there is a key called END, end. Click the end key on your keyboard. Okay, so now this is even with the floor, right? So the way I can tell is each one of those big boxes, the big checkerboards, is usually about 100 units a piece, and I see 3 of them, and we told this thing to be 300 units tall. Now, where's your first-person character? The best and easiest way to do this is, you see where your details panel is? Okay, just above your details panel you should have something called a world outliner. Now that may be one of the windows that you did not check on, so we may need to go back to Windows and open up your world outliner, just like we opened up the details panel and the place actors.
I see the world outliner.
Go ahead and click on that.
I should click on the first.
Your world outliner is everything that you have inside your game. So up at the very top there's a search menu and you can type in the word first, since the word first is part of the word that we're going to. So what we're doing is we're filtering to find this object.
First person world.
Nope, that's your map. Go up to the very top where it says search and actually type in the word first. I already see it. It's the last option down there at the bottom. Double click on that. It'll take you straight to that object. There you are. So now zoom out and figure out where you are in the map, instead of having to look for yourself. Now you know where you are.
I think the second one.
Okay, so now that you know where you are, you can push play and you can walk over to that building and you can check and see whether it's the right height. At 300 units, you being 200, that should be high enough. If you cannot see the play button, it's going to be up on the top toolbar where all your icons are in the double arrows. So if you click on the double arrows, you'll see the other options that are not visible because of the size of the window that you have. You'll find the play button and push play. Okay, let's go walk over to the base floor of your house. The geometry that we just created. Okay, there it is. Walk up right next to it and then look up at it. Not the floating one.
No, I just want to get to the other side. So that
Hmm.
I'll do it with the character. There you go.
Okay, walk up to it. Look up. No, there you go. See? That's 300 units tall when your character is standing next to it. Alright, now hit escape on your keyboard. Go back over to that building, click on the building, your geometry. Now again, in your details panel, scroll down to the bottom, details panel, right hand side, scroll down, and what you're looking for is your brush settings again, and you'll see that one of the options underneath where you just were was hollow. Click on hollow. What that's done is it's now made interior walls. So now when you zoom in as an editor and you go into the box, you'll see that the box now has inside walls. Aha! Now you have the structure for the first half of your house. Now, at this point I gotta leave because it's already 4 o'clock and I need to get ready and go to work. But that hopefully will help, because now you can see the different panels that you were missing that you couldn't see before, and you at least have the first structure at the appropriate size and height for what it would need to be for the house. Now what I would recommend is definitely that slowness, that sketchiness is probably coming because you got too many things running, and at some point at your convenience I would take it into a micro center or computer store of your choice and ask them to figure out how much more RAM you can put in there. But does that help?
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, well I definitely have to go. I really need to get going because I need to start tearing stuff down here.